Hello and welcome to Legal Bites. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. We don't give legal advice, but we do talk about how the law works and try to look into our crystal ball to see how things might turn out. If you're enjoying this on YouTube, we'd love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, all the great YouTube-y stuff. And if you want to listen while out and about, we're now offering our live streams in podcast form where you can leave a rating and review. Links are in the description below. As well as to our clips channel where you can find some of the best clips taken from our live streams. Otherwise, if you want to catch me elsewhere, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on Locals. All right, here we are. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Okay, we are jumping right in. We're getting into the cross-examination of, who is this witness again? Steve Graff. He's the ski patrol manager.
See, there's a time here, 11:55 a.m.
Hope you guys are doing
I see
well.
that.
Okay.
We'll do some more conversation.
Can we assume that's a fairly accurate time?
Yes.
And that Whitney Smith, when she picked up Terry Sanderson, marked it as 12:02.
That's when the dispatch came in, was 12:02.
Dispatch. Okay, 12:02. Now, you notice here, name of student. This one has been whited out, but on one that we have, it has Gwyneth Paltrow's name there, correct?
I don't know which one you have.
Well, the one I have has it whited out, but the defense has her name in there.
I see this one that's whited out.
Yeah. And this was a falsehood, correct? The name of the student wasn't Gwyneth Paltrow.
Is court loud?
Was it?
Okay.
I'm not sure the name
Turn
of
that
the
down.
student.
Well,
Oh, also, this is not live?
here.
Hang on.
I believe this form is
I'm
commenting on Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah, as a student, but she wasn't his student, right?
Is that better?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Am I balanced?
Now, would you agree that
Let me know.
the crash, the ski crash, was serious enough to warrant someone like Eric Christensen writing a formal report? Correct?
It was serious enough that he made comments about it at the end of the day.
Okay. Is that a yes to my question?
What was your question again?
Serious enough to write a report?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'm a bit soft. Oh. Okay.
And you
Put
recognize
myself up then.
that he claimed here twice that he didn't see it. Right here, I didn't see it. And then a little lower.
Oh, that was good before.
Did you witness the accident?
Is this okay? I turned myself up
No.
a little bit.
Do you see that?
Yes, I see
Okay.
that.
Now,
Okay, then
despite the fact that he didn't see it,
I'll turn myself up.
and
a little bit
Gwyneth
then.
was not his
Okay.
student, he blamed the male skier anyway. Correct?
Okay, thanks for letting me know about the sound. Hopefully this is okay.
He blamed the male skier for the crash, correct? Now, did that bother you?
Is there a question?
Yeah, there was. He blamed the male.
You allowed that.
This is a very simple question. Okay. He blamed the male skier.
Can you answer the question?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, you
Well,
can
that
answer, or
wasn't
yes,
yes
he
to
blamed the male
question.
skier.
It was yes to the judge question. I can't answer your question. I'm just reading before
Okay.
I answer it.
This cross-examination is off to a good start.
Just read additional comments there.
I did. I don't know that I see blame there.
First thing male skier stated was that she appeared right in front of him thus admitting he was the uphill skier. She
Right.
never saw him because he came in from behind. Now, you don't consider that to be a blame?
I consider that to be just what it says, that thus admitting he was the uphill skier.
Okay. Did it bother you that now at the time you were in charge of all ski instructors, weren't you?
No,
What was your title?
I was the ski patrol manager.
Ski patrol manager.
Correct.
Okay. Ski patrol manager. Did it bother you that a Deer Valley employee, an instructor, whose report you read, blamed the male skier even though he didn't see it? Did that bother you at all at the time?
I don't see blame here. I
Okay.
just see thus admitting that he was the uphill skier.
Now, did it bother you, Mr. Graff, that on this report, he never got the male skier's contact information?
No,
Now, you're sitting there a day or two later, you testified about it, and you read this report, and there's a crash that was serious enough to haul someone down off the mountain on a toboggan. And this man who's writing this report never gets the male skier's contact information. That didn't bother you?
that didn't bother me.
Did it bother you that Mr. Christensen never gave Gwyneth Paltrow's contact information? That bother you?
That didn't bother me.
Did it bother you that Mr. Christensen never gave his contact information to anybody?
None of these bothered me because at the time, everybody skied away with the assumption that everyone was fine.
Okay, so your understanding was that everyone skied away, even though a ski patrol person named Whitney Smith hauled Terry Sanderson off the mountain in a toboggan, and in your definition, that's everyone skiing away because they're all fine, correct?
Whitney Smith responded to Mr. Sanderson in a different location from where the collision occurred.
That's true.
So they all skied away.
That seems to be correct from
Now, let me ask you this. This claims here that a man with 4 documented broken ribs, 2 of which were separated, broken, not just cracked, but separated. 4 documented broken ribs, said he was okay to 2 other ski patrollers that allegedly came by. Did that bother you at all?
That's my understanding of what happened.
Did it bother you that allegedly, this yellow over here, but a patroller came by to check on everyone? Did it bother you that there was no log of that patroller?
No,
Didn't bother you. Okay. So nothing so far has bothered you, right? Okay.
these are just the facts. They're-
Everyday life at Deer Valley, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did it bother you see this right here where my cursor is?
Yes.
That Eric Christensen, after this crash, goes to lunch with one of the most famous actresses in the world and her family. Did that bother you at all?
No, I think that's standard practice for ski instructors.
Did it bother you that 3 hours after lunch or
You're not allowed
so,
to have lunch that day?
that he then writes his report? That bother you? Did that concern you at all?
No, that's typical of what happens.
did it ever occur to you that this instructor might be covering up bad conduct by himself to protect Miss Paltrow, a big spender at Deer Valley? Did that ever concern you or bother you?
No.
Did it ever concern you or bother you that he might be covering up bad conduct by Gwyneth Paltrow?
I mean,
No.
yeah,
Didn't you basically wink and a nod
he just has
at
to
this bad conduct?
maintain.
Wink and a nod at it.
Don't budge.
Can you define that?
Do you know what wink and a nod means?
No.
Well, actually, you did, because we had a deposition on another case. But wink and a nod, as I'm using it, means you see something wrong, but you just wink at it and go on and don't do anything about it. Isn't that what you did here today?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It's good that
Why wasn't this instructor
because that can be a vague
terminated
phrase
for
that can
filing
mean
a
different
false
things to different
report?
This is his report. There's nothing in it that's false.
Isn't it true that you believe he wasn't fired because he did nothing wrong? He did nothing wrong.
Correct.
Okay. And there was no cover up by Deer Valley, correct?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
people. Ineffective cross-examination.
Mr. Sykes.
In my opinion, ineffective. It's not even worth doing a redirect.
Good to see you again, Mr. Graff. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Very nice of you. It's okay. It was cooperating yesterday. I think I just need to go back to the old technology again. Okay, so I just want to ask you, Mr. Graff, one question.
Excuse me 1 second. I got my computer.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I just want to ask you, Mr. Graff, a quick question about the patrol log. Published this, we looked at it yesterday with you, Defendant's Exhibit 26A. You were asked questions, not today, but before you left the stand yesterday by plaintiff's counsel about this bad boot entry here. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And do you remember questions about how that was sort of a minor issue, and he was asking why that would be logged, but other major issues might not be?
Yes.
So can you explain what is a bad boot and what would it require of a patroller who came upon that kind of a problem?
You know, I'm not exactly sure what this bad boot issue was, but it could be that a buckle was broken. It could be that, as funny as it sounds, could be they were on the wrong feet. You know, you see things like that. So there was some issue that Jess responded to, and it was as simple as a bad boot.
And might it require a toboggan down the hill if someone had a malfunction that they couldn't get down the hill?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then this section here, 1202, again, I'll use this little laser pointer, 1202 here. It over in the nature of the injury discussion, it says skier collision and disorientation. Do you know who wrote that?
I don't know who wrote it. Whoever is manning the dispatch is the person who puts these entries in.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then that it would not be Whitney Smith that wrote that?
It would not be Whitney Smith. They're transcribing what Whitney Smith is saying over the radio. So Whitney Smith was on scene 2 minutes after the call came in. And then whoever was there wrote down what she said.
Okay.
And she said that she was on scene of a skier collision with the patient experiencing disorientation.
Right. And the jury has heard what her experience was, and you don't know anything further than you've already told us about that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions.
All right, you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a possibility the witness may be called back?
Not from us.
Yeah, very small.
Okay, so you're still under, I guess,
You're
this
saying there's
trial.
a
So
chance.
please don't discuss the case with any of the other witnesses. Thank you.
We have been through 15 witnesses so far. Isn't that wild?
Mr. Owens,
Yeah,
is your next
wild.
witness ready?
Hey, Nate.
Yes.
Oh, wait.
Our
What
next
happened?
witness is
Added
Dr.
you, and then you
Scher.
popped out.
We
Hey, Nate.
will
Hey,
need
what's
a
going on?
diesel and to set up for him
Sorry.
to draw.
Not too
and
much.
We may
Just
need a
did
second
a
to
short.
do that.
Just watched a
Okay.
short
Okay.
cross-examination. Seemed very ineffective of this.
Go ahead and set up.
The ski patrol manager. So this is where we're basically into Gwyneth Paltrow's witnesses now, minus
Dr.
Terry
Scher?
Sanderson will be called back at some
Good
point.
morning. Come on forward here and be sworn in as a witness.
Okay, who is this?
Do you
chap?
swear that the testimony you are about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
I love this how
Take a
every
seat
jurisdiction is so different.
And
Some
adjust
places
your
the bailiff
microphone
that
and then
swears you in,
please
the
state
clerk
your full
swears you in
name
here,
and
some places
spell it
the
all
judge
out for
swears
us.
you in. It's like insane.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me turn you up a little bit. For some reason, it used to be
My
we
name
were the
is
loud ones
Irving
and court
Scher,
was super quiet. Now we're the
IRV.
quiet ones.
ING. Last name is SCHER.
Thank you for being with us here today, Dr. Scher.
This is the
Let's-
doctor.
Let's begin by just asking you what you understand
First
your
ex-witness.
role here to be today.
To teach the jury about biomechanical engineering related to
Ooh.
snow sports and particular skiing.
And
That sounds like a cool job.
do you have an understanding of what
There you are.
plaintiff's biomechanical expert, Dr. Boehm,
You're
said about
pretty
this
quiet.
case?
Let me turn you up
I
again.
have. I've read his
Oh my! I
deposition
can turn myself
testimony
up.
and his trial
No, I got
testimony. So I do understand
You're
what he's
better now.
saying in the case. Yes,
Okay, and you have opinions about his
I'm still
testimony,
low
is that
also?
right?
that is correct.
Okay.
I've analyzed his biomechanical engineering analysis.
That's right.
So the jury will get to hear your
Biomechanical
response to his analysis.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So before we get to that, let's talk about your background and training so they understand why you and not me.
Well, we're paying you to give
are
us
on
good
stand.
testimony here.
Where did you go to school?
I did my bachelor's of science and engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. I majored in mechanical engineering and applied mechanics. And then after undergrad, I moved west and I got my master's and my PhD at UC Berkeley in the mechanical engineering
Oh,
department.
you see Berkeley.
And
Shout
I
out
had
to the
two
California
disciplines that I
people.
specialized in.
Heyo.
One was called dynamic systems. That's how objects move in space when forces are applied to them. And the other is biomechanical engineering.
Better spot.
And that is the application of physics and engineering to the human body,
That
in
better?
particular, looking at how
like that
people
better.
get injured and how to prevent injuries.
And did you do a PhD thesis?
I did.
And can you explain what you worked on? for
Sure. I was the last in a line of what we called skiologists. I studied the
Skiologists.
biomechanics of alpine skiing. I
Biomechanics of
created
alpine
load
skiing?
cells. So those are
That is so
devices
niche.
that measure
That's
the
so cool.
forces. And I put them in between the skis and the bindings. And I had different instrumentation on skiers. And it was the first time, or at least that I'm aware of, that anyone in the scientific community was able to measure the forces and the body motions of skiers from the top of the mountain all the way down to the bottom. And I did this with beginners, people who had only skied 2 or 3 days in their whole life, all the way up to professional racers. And so that's what I got my PhD in.
And this is actually measurements on the slope as people are skiing.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm measuring the forces applied to the person and their body motions as they're skiing. Well, and falling. We did have falls as well.
This is
Right,
so
and
cool.
this is not just
I
calculations.
don't know why I'm like
in
so intrigued.
some
by this.
ivory tower, but you're actually out in the field looking at the-
Hands-on work, which is quite difficult when you have electronics and snow and water. It was challenging for sure.
Yeah, probably having
And
a lot of things
do
shorting
you also
on you.
do any teaching?
I did teach. After I graduated with my PhD, I did a small postdoc in the biology department at Berkeley. And then after that, while I was working for a company, I taught at the University of Southern California. I was in the physical therapy department on the medical campus, and I taught intro to biomechanics. And I also did research there at USC. And then I moved. I now live in Seattle, and I'm at the University of Washington. I have an affiliate professorship there. I'm an associate professor at the University of Washington, and I occasionally lecture, but mostly advise grad students.
What about professional licenses? Do you have any of those?
I'm a registered professional mechanical engineer in California, Washington, and Alaska.
And then in terms of
Why not Oregon?
professional societies, these groups of
They're not
people
linked.
that get together to research and work on a certain field. Are you connected to any such organizations?
I am.
And what are those?
I am chair of a group called ASTM F27. If you've ever gone to a ski shop and purchased ski equipment or rented ski equipment and they set your bindings, what some people call DIN settings, that's based on the standards from ASTM, and I'm the chairman of that group. We also do other snow sports equipment. I represent the U.S. for snow sports equipment safety at the International Standards Organization, so the ISO. So
I mean,
if you go over to Europe, you'll have
You've proven up
same,
how good of an expert he is.
release and retention settings for your skis. Your bindings won't pull off your skis.
You know
They use
about
the same standards that we've developed here in the U.S.
especially
I'm also
after
president
the last
of a
witness
group
was like
called
so
the
short on the stand.
International
We're early in the
Society for
day.
Snow Sport Safety.
Jury is totally paying
And
attention
that's,
to this. They're probably like,
more
this is
academic
different.
than
This
the
is
other two
cool.
organizations I was mentioning.
At least I'm assuming
We
they're
call
like
it
me, I guess.
ISSS is
We'll just wait.
a
Not always
organization
with the,
worldwide
Gwyneth Paltrow.
to
Yeah.
present
Defense.
and publish
That's a good
their
Defense,
snow sports safety research.
Yeah.
And we have
Good.
members
That's
from
a good catch.
all over the world: Switzerland, Korea, Norway, obviously the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It's quite a great group, and it's really the group that helped develop ski binding standards.
So you do some research on the safety of snow sports like skiing, correct?
That is my main focus of my research ever since grad school, and I've continued to do that now.
And then you also evaluate cases in a litigation context, is that right?
I do. About 15%, 20% of my work is forensic work. The rest is research and development.
R&D.
So most of the time, are you doing research to try and improve the safety of skiers on the hill?
Yes, and I should say it's not just snow sports. I work in other recreational sports areas, water sports, mountain biking, other areas too, but snow sports is my favorite, my passion.
So let's explain to the jury what biomechanical engineering is, just because we could use a refresher.
Sure. Biomechanical engineering is the application of physics and mechanical engineering to the human body. But in a forensic sense, it's what links the event to the injury. So if you have some type of event and there's forces and motions in the event, in the accident, the forces are applied to a person, there's internal forces on their, like in their body at the joints or something like that. The amount of force and the amount of motion it takes to create damage to the body, that is biomechanical engineering.
And how's that different than medicine? They're both dealing with the human body, but what's the difference?
Sure. The medical field tends to take the injured person, figure out what's wrong with them, so diagnosis, and then try to get them better, so treatment with an eventual outcome. So most medical training is after the injury, as opposed to what forces and motions create the injury. We like to think of ourselves on different sides of the injury.
Thank you. Can biomechanical engineers determine the forces required to produce fractures of bones in the body?
Yes, there's a lot of research on that, and that's one of the main areas for biomechanical engineering.
So is there scientific literature that describes the forces needed for, say, rib fractures?
There is, yes.
And you're familiar with that literature?
I am, yes.
And let's maybe ask a specific question about that literature. Given your knowledge of it, does a 70-year-old man need to fall on his side with his elbow between him and the ground to cause rib fractures?
No. So there have been a number of scientific studies, mostly done by biomechanical engineers, but there's other scientists who have looked at this as well. And what they do is they take cadavers or portions of cadavers and they apply forces to them. Sometimes they'll swing a pendulum into the side of a cadaver or to the front, or they'll have a plate, a very heavy weighted plate, contact the person arm down, arm up at 45 degrees, or they'll drop the cadaver in different configurations, and then they'll see what injuries are produced. And so when they've done this, in particular for chest impacts, what we find is you can get lateral rib fractures, according to the biomechanical engineering literature. You can get lateral rib fractures with an impact to the side with your arm down or with your arm up. But you can also get lateral rib fractures through compression.
Thank you,
the front to back compression
Elaine.
Of the chest.
Yeah.
So if I
I'm glad you liked it. Thank
press
you.
in like this, what happens is
Yeah, I haven't
the
seen it
ribs
yet.
actually
I didn't
bend
realize
out
you did
on the side.
I did
And that
that you
can
did
create
one with him.
fractures on
So
the
I've got to
side.
check it out.
That's quite
Sure.
common as well. So
But your
rib fractures are not just from
your video on
side
Jonathan
contact.
Major
It can
was
be
really
from
good.
front to back compression.
Oh, he
Well,
called the police. Yeah, he called. I was surprised he called the police.
So-
He called the police.
That is
Let's get
surprising.
to what you did in this case. So what did I ask you to do in this case?
Basically, you asked me to evaluate Dr. Bain's biomechanical engineering analysis to see if it was accurate and correct.
And what material did you review? I think you already mentioned you read his transcript and you watched
when you have your expert review and the other expert
I did,
stuff,
yes.
you're always in a better
maybe
place.
for the jury, in case they need a reminder, he had that green screen in the back of him.
Right,
Oh,
just the talking
him.
head.
Is
Exactly.
speaking
Agent
from Florida, I
47.
think.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
I remember. Oh,
And
Dr. Bain.
So let's
That's what he said.
just start with his analysis. Do you agree with it?
I do not. I do
Okay.
not agree with his analysis.
And maybe before we explain why, just give us a sense of what you understand his method and analysis to be.
Sure. As I've gone through what he testified to in his deposition and the trial, looking at his calculations and what he's done, to me, there's two parts to his analysis. The first is calculations to show that Miss Paltrow had to land on Mr. Sanderson in order to get the rib fractures that he got. And then there was a second part that basically said, because Miss Paltrow had to land on Mr. Sanderson, that could only happen with Miss Paltrow hitting him from behind. It couldn't happen any other way. It was impossible. So that's my understanding of the kind of the two parts, the main parts.
Thank you. We'll go over those in more detail.
The physics,
As you looked
as
at
explained
his
yesterday,
analysis,
seemed to
you
explain
read
why it
everything
makes
that he
sense
read,
for
correct?
her
I
to
did.
end up
And
on top
did
of
you
him.
read
but
even
had
more
been
than
hit
that?
by him.
I had additional depositions. That's correct.
Of the various people that were at the scene of the accident.
That's right.
So let's get one thing out of the way. Do you agree with Dr. Bain that Mr. Sanderson's rib fractures
Of course
did
not.
not occur during the initial
Yeah.
skier-to-skier contact?
Yes, I think that's correct. There's no disagreement at this point, at least from the testimony I've heard. The skier portion where they first contact, no matter which version we have, did not create the rib fractures. I don't think anyone thinks that at this point. So that's good. We agree.
And
Okay, so that's not disputed.
in terms of just a quick overview before we go into his calculations, which you can explain to the jury, do you believe that Ms. Paltrow's account, and I should say, are you familiar with her account?
I am.
And you heard her trial testimony
I did.
and read her deposition. And
Yes.
do you believe her account of the collision is consistent with what you know about biomechanical engineering?
Object. Goes beyond the scope of this expert witness.
It calls for the evaluation.
Yeah.
Would you
overrule
please approach the bench?
think you
I
overruled
didn't
that
hear the
because he's-
question.
It was essentially, I think he's asking. Well, you can just rewind it, but I think he's just asking. Do you agree with Gwyneth Paltrow's recitation of
account
the
of-
events? Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's appropriate because he's going to come to a conclusion as to like what happened.
It's an
'Cause that's what
evaluation.
he's-
Yeah.
Yeah, so that seems to be well within the scope of what it is that he's there to talk about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, he's already established. He's a biomechanical engineering expert specifically for alpine sports or snow sports. Like this is literally what he does. Like this is it. So I don't know. I feel like this is just like, are there a lot of ski crash cases that end up going to trial? I feel like there aren't.
I don't think there are.
So I wonder how many times he's like testified in court with like as an expert, because I feel like this is like his moment.
Oh man.
So yeah, I don't know. It's cool. Like I feel like he has a really cool job. I don't know, just really cool career. Literally also, but because we're talking about snow sports. Anyway, bad joke. But
Yeah, well, but like
Okay,
we said,
so
we're going to
let's go back
overrule
to
that
that
objection.
question.
That objection didn't make sense.
I was asking you,
no, it didn't.
in your opinion, is Ms. Paltrow's account consistent with what you know about biomechanical engineering?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And maybe another way to put that is it consistent with the laws of physics?
It's the same question. Yes.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
Dr. Boehm, the jury heard, talked a lot about Newton's laws and the laws of physics, applying those to the evidence in this case. And again, in your analysis, as you apply them, Ms. Paltrow's account is consistent with those.
Objection lacks foundation.
Overruled?
That's correct. Ms. Paltrow's version, her scenario is consistent with the laws of physics and what we know about biomechanics.
And then the account that Dr. Boehm gave, and that is based on Mr. Ramon's account, is that consistent with the laws of physics?
I do not believe it is, and I can explain as we get into it.
Yes. Okay. Great. We'll explain that. Let's go to Dr. Boehm's calculations, so you can explain to the jury your analysis of those.
Andrew Ramirez.
We have an easel,
Right.
and as I understand it, you would
Absolutely.
like to
It
kind
must
of
be very
draw
expensive.
so that you can show them what the equations mean. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So I'll grab the easel and then that board.
And by the way, Andrew Ramirez, thanks so much for the super chat. And earlier, Ellen, not Sarah Lee, thank you so much for your super chat as well. I should have thanked you for it before.
Judge, where do you want this easel?
On the screen. He's going to also need to see the screen. So is it okay if we put it right here? Are you going to be able to see that?
Daniel Weston, experts aren't necessarily always that effective. I mean, especially where it's like, you know that one expert is going to testify one way, the other one's going to testify the other way. It's like they kind of end up in a wash a lot of times. So it really just depends on where the analysis goes. And if he's a good enough witness to be able to explain this to the jury in a way that they can understand and they're actually going to be able to pay attention. Because sometimes you have somebody that really knows what they're talking about, but has a really hard time explaining it and holding the attention of the jury. Not every person out there that has expertise in something is able to have a YouTube channel on it.
Something that Dr. Boehm pulled up in his deposition. Do you remember seeing these documents? And for the record and for counsel, these are the notes in Exhibit 3 of Dr. Boehm's deposition. Oh, thank you. Officer.
I missed the question there.
Yep, no, you're fine. So I'm just pointing you to.
Before you, these are not admitted exhibits, though.
Yeah, I'm not
This is a
asking
good
them to be
question.
admitted. They were just shown in Dr. Boehm's deposition, so we're showing them here as well.
This is a good question. I don't know if Sanderson.
Okay, but not in his trial testimony.
He's responding to these.
You said deposition.
He also showed it in his trial testimony.
So
Oh,
direct-
trial deposition.
I was going to
Withdrawn.
say direct things to the judge, but
I recall this being flashed
Withdrawn.
during his deposition or during his trial testimony.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Schur. So you recognize this page?
I do.
And I was just describing it. This was shown in Dr. Boehm's trial testimony, correct?
That's correct.
And he explained that these are his calculations.
That's right.
Okay, and there's another page as well. I think it's the one just before it, correct?
That's correct. This is where he starts the calculations for the ribs. We're concentrating on the ribs here because that's what he says determines how the accident happened. He said the head injury doesn't matter for that. It's only the ribs.
Okay, great. So since I have very little idea what's going on there and you do, maybe explain to the jury what's going on.
Sure. Can we Go to the page
Math is
before
magic.
this.
Sure.
Science is sorcery.
And maybe if you, it's just a little bit hard to hear.
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a little better. Yeah, thanks.
So he's using some basic equations for what we call the center of mass to figure out what happens when someone falls to the ground. Center of mass is if you were to balance someone on your finger, the point that you'd hold them at so that they stay balanced. It's usually a little bit below your belly button, kind of midline front to back, midline left to right. And so if you took all the person's weight, all their person's mass, and put it into one point, that would be the point that you're interested in. So that's what Dr. Boehm is doing in these calculations, is he's using that point for Mr. Sanderson. And this first part here, where he has this, that's an equation, X is position. So he's saying there's a certain distance that center of mass falls, and you can see that over here. That's 3.5 feet, or he does it in meters, 1.0668 meters. So center of mass falls to the ground. He's saying that there's no initial falling position, that's fine. No initial falling velocity, V is velocity. And then he has 1/2 acceleration times time squared. And that equation is correct. Acceleration here is the acceleration from gravity. So what he's saying is Mr. Sanderson's fall to the ground for the center of mass from 3.5 feet, which is probably about right, hits the ground within, and he calculates the time, he solves for time, 0.466 seconds. So that's the first part of that, which is great. The problem comes in that he then says the velocity at contact is 1/2 acceleration times time. And that is absolutely wrong. That is not the velocity at contact. The velocity at contact is just the acceleration times time. So he has this extra half. And it was unclear to me why that would be there to start. And I'm not sure why he put that in. But it creates problems for his calculations and his opinions moving forward. If we can go to the next page, I can explain that. So these are his equations.
Garbage in,
If
garbage
you
out.
remember in his testimony, he said
What are you saying?
4,000 newtons. That's an engineering unit in metric for force. 4,000 newtons is roughly 950 pounds, I think in English, but newtons is fine. Over 4,000 newtons, you get the rib fractures. So what is this equation here? I'll show you that and then explain why that 1/2 makes a big difference. So that equation there comes from, at first, kinetic energy. We label that as KE, which is equal to 1/2 mass times velocity squared for that center of mass. And then he's saying, okay, Mr. Sanderson, as he hits the ground, has a certain kinetic energy. That energy has to go somewhere. So what happens is a force is applied from the ground to his center of mass, and he decelerates over some distance. So you can see here he has 3 inches written here. That's important. So this kinetic energy has to be taken up by some force over a distance. That's some amount of work, and that will equal the kinetic energy. And then he divides both sides to get the force. The distances cancel on this side. So the force on Mr. Sanderson is 1/2 mass times velocity squared divided by distance. And that's exactly what we have here. We have 1/2 mass, velocity squared, and distance. Now, remember, he's doing this in metric. So that 136, that is in kilograms. That's equal to about 300 pounds. So here he has Miss Paltrow and Mr. Sanderson's mass put together. So in this fall, he's saying, okay, the kinetic energy of both of them is needed here during contact. But can we go back to page 5?
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna
He
be
uses
accurate.
the velocity here, the 2.29, that has the 1/2 in this. So if we go to the next page, yeah. So you can see he's using the wrong velocity. What happens is if you use the wrong velocity in here, let's do beams as, call this wrong. So what you get is 1/2 mass times 1/2 acceleration times time. Oops, squared. There we go. Divided by distance, and squared there. Correct is 1/2 mass.
This is so beautiful.
Acceleration times time squared. So that 1/2 goes into this equation. What does that mean? That means that this half gets squared. It becomes 1/4. So the force that Dr. Boehm calculated for this landing was actually 1/4 of the force he should have calculated. He was off by a factor of 4.
Well, yeah, that's
So
true.
it shouldn't be 4,680 newtons. It should be 18,600 and some newtons. I have it here.
Whoa, there's some big issues here.
18,678 newtons. So he's off by
So
quite
beautiful
a bit.
that he's just showing on
And
the
if
board.
I may, Dr.
Here's
Scher,
the right way.
this
Here's
is
the
obviously
wrong
all
way.
at least new to me and maybe new to some jurors. What in the end is the takeaway there if there's that much of a mistake?
So there's two things. One is if there were 18,000 newtons applied to Mr. Sanderson's chest, we would expect much worse injuries. The biomechanical engineering literature,
That's true.
or much less than that,
He'd
has
be almost dead.
many rib fractures, internal injuries, all sorts of things. We don't see any of that.
A
for
lot
Mr.
of
Sanderson.
force.
But the real takeaway and the importance in this case is the mass here. So because he does the 1/4, he needs the mass. He needs the mass to be 136 kilograms. Now, if you redo the calculations correctly with just Mr. Sanderson's mass, so Mr. Sanderson is about 80.5 kilograms, or roughly 177 pounds, at least according to
Ooh,
the medical
quite heavy
records.
for 5'5".
If you do the calculations with the correct equations and only his mass, you get over 4,000 newtons when he lands, actually.
You get more with him alone than with them both.
11,056 newtons. So if he were to fall to the snow using Dr. Boehm's calculation method the correct way, then just Mr. Sanderson falling, not Ms. Paltrow involved at all, he could get rib fractures.
Yeah.
This is not quite correct overall. Normally we use what's called effective mass. So all of Mr. Sanderson's mass wouldn't go through his chest. Maybe there'd be some force on his
spread out
leg,
over
he
the.
hit his head, some force on his head.
Yeah,
We typically would
spread out.
say maybe 50% of his mass would be appropriate for effective mass. So instead of the 80 kilograms, we would do.
And that's because he's trying to explain when you fall,
I should
you
put
fall
over
on
here
multiple
this
parts of your
one
body. So
being
that force will be
11,000.
spread out on your arm, on your ribs, on your
And
legs.
if we do the 40
So only a
kilograms
percentage
instead
of
for
the mass,
Mr.
unless you fall
Sanderson,
on
so
like a point, like it's something that's
Yeah.
very sharp or a point, then all that mass would be in that one spot, but it's spread out.
and we use the correct
Yeah.
equation, we get sorry, I don't do the math in my head. 5,500 newtons, approximately. What this means is Mr. Sanderson can fall to the ground without Ms. Paltrow landing on him and sustain the rib fractures according to Dr. Boehm's calculation method.
His own calculation.
So
is
if
just
done
take out the
correctly,
bullet.
he cannot say his opinion that Ms. Paltrow had to land on Mr. Sanderson to get the rib fractures, which means that this goes through the rest of his analysis. So the rest of his analysis is wrong. So this is really
Garbage in,
critical,
garbage out.
that 1/2 that he did for the velocity, the wrong velocity, really threw the rest of his analysis into question.
Yikes.
So, Dr. Scher, there's a lot more we could say about the calculations, I'm sure, and you would approach it
This guy's
differently
good.
than he did. correct?
This is what they needed to do with this kind of
given
an
the way
expert,
he did
was to
it,
show,
if
not
he did
tell.
it correctly,
Have him work through
you're
these
saying that
calculations on the board.
the conclusions that he came
But
to
now the
are
other guy has to
inconsistent
come
with
and
his
work through
opinion.
his calculations on the board
Yes,
to
exactly.
rebut this if he's going to
Okay.
come back.
He's already
So-
testified, though.
Yeah, but they get rebuttal
yeah.
time, no? They
Okay,
gotta
Doctor,
have
yeah,
this
that's
guy
let's
fair.
talk
That's
about
But it's finished. He's finished.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's
Game
fair. They could use him.
Let's
I
talk
mean,
about
but then
skier
they have
skier
to make a decision like
collisions. You've,
on time.
as you explained earlier, done some research
They've
to
been, I think, blowing through their time from
understand
what
what
it seems
forces
like.
are like on the ski slope. In this case, how would you apply what you know about physics to understand the claims about the ski collision?
Sure, I would apply Newton's laws to the contacts, the different versions of the events, and see what makes sense, how it would unfold. Do the physics of the contact that's being testified to make sense? Is it self-consistent?
And this may be another opportunity to draw some pictures if you need to, so feel free to if it will help you. But you were talking about the center of mass earlier. How does that concept factor into how you would evaluate the evidence in this case?
Sure, yeah, if it's okay to draw again.
You may.
Thank you.
And I can see what you're drawing through the monitor here, so.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Great.
What did the judge say?
And if you
Did he say, I like to see
more
what you're doing?
board or pages, we have them now. Is that correct?
This is just being so beautifully
Okay,
done.
yeah, correct. Go ahead.
So the
I
thing
have
to
to
know
run,
with
but I will be
Newton's
back.
laws, force equals mass times acceleration. If you
Force
have
equals mass
some,
times acceleration.
I'm going to draw
That's
two
Newton's
versions
law.
of a skier, and I'm not the best Pictionary player. I'm going to draw a top-down
You guys will
version, and I'll
later.
draw a side version.
Okay, Nate.
So
See ya.
let's start with the top-down. So if we have a skier, and here's the skier's head, and here's the skier's nose, and then we have two skis. The center of mass would be, as we mentioned, looking down somewhere around here. Now, if you have a force that goes through the center of mass, so let's say the force goes through,
So this part I'm a little bit confused about what he's drawing here.
then the person will accelerate in this direction. They'll accelerate along the line of the force.
Oh,
But
I see.
what happens
Okay.
when you have a
And these are
force that
speeds.
doesn't go through the center of mass? It'll create an acceleration going in that same direction, but it'll also, there's a distance here, it'll also create a torque, which is equal to the force times the distance, that will cause the person to rotate.
Okay.
And that's really important because if the force does not go through the center of mass, there's always a rotation. So if you're hit on
Yeah, that
this
makes sense.
looking down, this would be the right side, then the person's going to rotate counterclockwise in this image. The same thing is true if we look at a skier from the side. So if here we have our skier, and here's their pelvis and center of mass. Our ski boot. And if the person, for example, has a force applied below their center of mass,
Yeah, just take him out at the knees.
then there's, again, some distance. That's going to create a torque and a backward rotation so that the person moves backward and falls back. There's two things to note with this for skiing in particular that's different than most other events. Skis have releasable bindings. So if I'm looking at this side view, the boot is held in by a heel piece and a toe piece. And so if you have someone pitching forward, if the ski slows and the person's center of mass moves forward, it'll create a torque on the boot and it'll release the heel of the boot. And for someone of Miss Paltrow's size, that could be anywhere from, well, it's approximately 143 foot-pounds. So 143 pounds acting over a foot. Same thing is true for the top-down view. If we look at the toe piece for the binding, if there's a torque on the ski, a twisting torque, the ski will also release from the boot. And for someone of Miss Paltrow's size, it's about 37 foot-pounds. So in front of the boot, if there's 37 pounds, 1 foot ahead, it'll release. If it's 2 feet ahead, it's half that value. So roughly 17. So these are the principles that we need to understand the mechanics of an impact and a fall.
So when we apply those principles to this case, what conclusions do you draw?
Sure. The first is that Miss Paltrow's version of events is consistent with the laws of physics and how people move and rotate.
And what about Mr. Ramon's version?
For Mr. Ramon's version, I couldn't get it to work. It doesn't match with the laws of physics. The complete part of his testimony just doesn't fit.
And so can you explain why it doesn't fit?
Sure. So Mr. Ramon's version, maybe I should sit down.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So in Mr. Ramon's version, he says that he sees Miss Paltrow contact Mr. Sanderson squarely in the back. And he says that it's in the middle. It couldn't be any more in the middle than if he tried or if she tried. And then also that she rode him down. I think the quote was something like, in his deposition, he says, like she couldn't have been on his back any more than if he had strapped her to his back, something like that. So as they're going down in Mr. Ramon's version, Mr. Sanderson goes spread eagle, arms out, legs out. And the key for me is that Mr. Ramon says that the inside edges of those skis that are going into this V catch, and Mr. Sanderson stops on a dime. And if that were the case, then Miss Paltrow would keep moving. And, well, maybe I should draw.
Sure, go ahead if it will.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I'm going to try to draw a top-down version of this. So if we have Mr. Sanderson, and here are his skis.
Okay, so yeah, this is the top of his head. Imagine as if he's like a giant round
And then
person.
I'm going to use a different color for.
And he has a very
Miss
bulbous
Paltrow.
nose.
How about blue? Miss Paltrow contacts him from the back. And now this is the same whether one ski is between his or both skis. If the skis are apart, it's a little bit different, so we can get to that in a minute. But if her skis are between his, let's just say, then when he falls, and here is his, so they're moving in this direction. That was probably obvious, but I wanted to make sure that was clear. So now we're still looking down. Here's Mr. Sanderson's back. Here's his head. Here's one arm. Here's another arm. Here's
But he
one
did
leg.
say his dictionary
another leg.
skills are not very good.
Remember, Mr. Ramon says that his skis are in a V, spread eagle. So now
I think
if
I
that
think
were to
this is
happen,
great.
then
I think this
he
is
stops
very
very
effective.
quickly, and Miss
How
Paltrow
cross-examination holds up.
is going to remain in contact somewhere around here, and her skis are going to stay underneath Mr. Sanderson.
Oh, like they popped off.
When that happens, it's like the center of mass continuing to move forward while the skis slow rapidly, which creates an upward force at that heel, it's going to create a heel release. But as you heard in the testimony, all the skis were on.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It takes actually very little force for this to release, the heel piece to release in a scenario like this. So it doesn't match with physics. And it's the same way whether one ski or both skis are in between.
Okay, so how do you know this, especially about the bindings releasing? How are you confident about that?
My experience, I mean, I've seen tons of binding releases. I know how bindings work. It's just physics.
Right. And you've specifically done research on binding releasing.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And you said earlier that there were other scenarios, the skis maybe between Mr. Sanderson's skis, maybe they're diagonal. Did you do evaluation of all those sort of scenarios, and did any of those work?
No, I couldn't get any of them to work. So the key is either she would come out of the bindings or she would be stuck on Mr. Sanderson. She wouldn't be able to move past him. If her skis stayed on in various versions of this, I don't know how she continues to move downhill the 10 feet that Mr. Ramon said she wound up if her skis are trapped underneath him.
And would you expect her to get an injury in any of these scenarios?
Well, certainly there's that potential, yes, a lower extremity injury for sure.
If, for example, her legs get stuck in one of the scenarios you mentioned.
Right. So, for example, if her ski is rotated out to the side going in that V with one of his skis, the other, whether it's on the outside or in the inside, can't wind up. So if her ski is on the outside, his ski is going to push her ski out. If this is her ski, as he's falling and moving into that V configuration, it's going to go from this position to here, and it's going to push her ski outward, which I would expect would create a toe release, a twisting release of the bindings, because it actually takes about 18 pounds of force, between 15 and 20, depending on how her bindings would be set. So very little force to release that toe piece. But even if it didn't release, then her ski winds up getting trapped by his, and she can't move forward. So, and in many of these scenarios, her leg would get twisted in a really odd way that would likely create injuries.
Okay, great. I think you can sit down again. And now what I'd like to do is ask you about whether you were involved in creating any animations that would help the jury understand your opinions in this case.
Yes.
And Your Honor, if I may ask for permission to show the witness these animations so that I can lay some foundation, he can use them to teach the jury.
Yeah, we reserve our same objections on these animations, Your Honor.
Understood.
Restarting.
Oh, this is nice because now they've already introduced this animation before with one of the previous witnesses, and so they can just have him watch it and be like, all right, the jury already saw this. You can watch this. What are your thoughts on this? Like applying your calculations to what has been testified to. It's a very nice shorthand way of doing it without having to really bore everyone in the room.
Take a recess while they straighten out the technology, and then we'll be back.
So, okay, this is very effective because he's basically what he's done in this direct examination is he has looked at the calculations that Dr. Bain had. That was the guy that was in front of a green screen on a video deposition, which, to be fair, video depositions are also just as a default matter, I always refer to them as like death by video deposition, right? Because if you guys watched the Johnny Depp trial on this channel, there were a lot of those, and it was rough getting through them because it's it can be rough, especially if they're not spliced in a way that can sort of allow the viewer to follow a narrative. The video depositions in this case have been a little bit better, but anyway, it's still it can be rough. Now here it's so effective for him to just be there on a whiteboard, basically, or on like a giant piece of paper, pad of paper, and to just show the jury, these are his calculations. I'm explaining to you step by step why it is that these calculations are done, what pieces are put into it. Like velocity is acceleration times time divided by distance. That makes sense, right? Something will get, if something has an increasing velocity, it's going to increase over time because of the fact that you're going downhill or what have you. Anyway, so he's able to explain these concepts in physics just by sort of walking through these things so that the jury can just, get a little lesson in physics, regardless of their educational level. And then go through and say, now these are the calculations that he did. This is why, he added something different here. I don't know why he did it, but this is incorrect. And this is why. And so now you have to then account for this and that. And it's like, he shows how like even just one early error, you can end up with a vastly different result. And so just basically, he doesn't have to get into any kind of snark. He doesn't have to get into any kind of like, yeah, this guy's just wrong. I think he's just wrong. I think he's just, biased or whatever. You don't even have to go there because he's just very matter-of-factly saying, this is just a simple error right here that ends up with the wrong conclusion. And so, going through the principles of the center of mass and how that can cause a rotational effect. Like initially when they were talking about how they collided and that there was a rotation or something, I couldn't quite see how that would happen. But after this witness, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So long as if we are to go with Gwyneth Paltrow's theory, that the theory or version of events, that Terry Sanderson hit her from behind. If he hits her from behind anywhere, even if he's like within her skis, but the center of his mass hits not the center of her mass anywhere, it will cause a rotation. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense if you visualize it. And the same thing with her being around 5'10", him being around 5'5". If he has a lower center of gravity, or at least he hits her at a lower center of gravity than where she's at, that can also cause her to flip backwards, like her legs just, come forward. And of course, with the skis being slick and continuing with that same, it all makes sense. It all makes a lot of sense. And so to have that along with the side-by-side comparisons with the other calculations that he says are wrong, I think is very, very effective here. And of course, the drawings are a bit simple. They're rudimentary. At first, I couldn't quite tell, what it was that he was drawing, even after he was like, yeah, this is an aerial view, like with the top of the head, the bulbous nose, very round body. Anyway, it was very, very clear, very interesting. There was a question also in the chat. Let me pull that up. Katara asked, can the other expert respond to this? So in theory, yes, the plaintiff side does have the opportunity to rebut the defense testimony. We've seen this in criminal cases plenty, but this also exists in civil cases as well. And that's because the plaintiff has the burden of proving their case. And that means that they go first. So if something comes up on the defense case in chief that the plaintiffs wouldn't have had an opportunity to respond to because they go first, they also have an opportunity to bring them up for the limited purpose of responding to the testimony on the other side that they wouldn't have been able to necessarily anticipate, or wouldn't have. I'm not sure. I honestly cannot remember. I mean, I did take a lot of notes, but I can't remember if Dr. Bain, the plaintiff's expert, if he had referred to this expert already in his direct examination. I can't remember right now. I don't think so, because I feel like I would. I don't know. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he did. Here's something also to know about these trials and these experts. So they're all commenting on each other's work across the aisle, right? They have access to what the other person is basically going to testify to, what they're going to conclude ahead of time. And that's because part of the pre-trial litigation procedure is that they have to exchange witness information at a certain date. They have to exchange the reports from the other side so that everybody has an opportunity to see what the other side is saying. You basically have to show your expert cards to the other side at a certain point. So before they anybody got to trial, anybody got to trial, they all knew what the other side was going to say. So, and they all knew what the other side had analyzed also. So theoretically, Dr. Bain should have known what Dr. Scher was going to say, and he should have been able to see his calculations and see his analysis, and basically be like, well, I disagree with what he said because, he made this error. But if you guys remember, or if you guys were watching, I don't know if you guys were watching, Dr. Bain, he testified, his video deposition testimony was on days 3 and 4, I think. I'm pretty sure it was split up between 2 days. I think it was 3 and 4. I mean, it was literally just him in front of a green screen. So he wasn't, I mean, they were showing his math problems, essentially, like the lined paper that we saw here, that he was responding. They flashed it on the screen really quickly. They showed it during Dr. Bain's testimony as well, but they didn't have him write out and explain. It's so different. It's way less engaging to do that. And so this is just a much more effective way of holding the attention of the jury, making sure that they actually understand. Because like I said, you can have an expert who is super knowledgeable. They absolutely know what they are talking about. And you can basically assume that they are number one in their field based on their credentials, and they come across as knowing what they're talking about, but they don't, they're not very effective at like actually explaining that to normies, right? Because they are so well versed in it that they can't just break it down for somebody who is a total noob. And we don't know who's on this jury. Like I mentioned earlier, we have people probably of varying educational levels. We do know apparently that because the defense attorney, Owens, he mentioned in his, I think it was his opening statement, which was weird. He mentioned that there's a nurse. So she probably has some knowledge of math and science and whatnot. But yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Scher is using the restroom.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and have the jury come in?
All right. Jury's coming back in. So then also, by the way, there was a question earlier as to whether Terry Sanderson was going to be in the courtroom, or if he was in the courtroom today. And it looks like, I don't know if you guys saw it, it flashed on the screen. He was walking in there. So I don't know. I assume he was there earlier, if he's there right now. But at least right now, he is actually, in fact, in the courtroom. And just because I'm not sure which part you were talking about is against
Dr.
Gwyneth's
Scher,
story,
you can take the stand.
but it
We're
is
just waiting for
possible.
the jury.
It is possible for his for Dr. Scher's testimony to conflict a little bit, or even a lot of
Are you
it, with Gwyneth Paltrow, so long as it doesn't
Yes.
confirm the other
Yeah,
side.
she's
So
monitoring.
remember, muddy middle goes to
Audio.
defendant.
Yeah, your audio's coming over.
All right. Is this better? Ooh, that coughing. It has been going on this entire time. Of course, I say that after I think I just coughed like 10 seconds ago. All right. I am very curious to see if this is going to hold up on cross-examination too. So we will see for sure. Because like I said, that's the case with all of these witnesses. By the end of a witness's direct examination, you should feel like, yeah, 100% checks out. I'm 100% with this witness. And then on cross-examination, that's when you start to say, oh, okay. Maybe there's a hole here. Maybe there's a hole there. I mean, or it just does nothing. Sometimes it's ineffective. That can happen too.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. May I approach to show the witness the animation?
You may.
All right.
So this animation is number 5, correct?
It is.
It's called Close Up. And I'm going to play it for you.
Are we going to get to see it? I want to see it.
Is this one of the animations that you helped prepare?
Oh, sorry, Counselor. I just see it again.
Sure.
Which number is it?
Number 5. It's called Close Up. And it's 22 seconds. So again, Mr. Scher, Dr. Scher, you're maybe explain to the jury your involvement in creating this animation.
Sure. I worked with Brian Brill at Mountain Graphics on the impact and fall portion of this animation. It's not meant to represent exactly what happened, but generally the idea of one of the family of ways this could happen in Miss Paltrow's version. We don't know some of the exact details of how they contacted, how long they interacted, but it gives an illustration of what I'm thinking, my understanding of her version, where she's contacted from behind and then fall to the right.
And does the animation make certain assumptions about various facts and testimony in the record in this case?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and you can explain those to the jury as we go through it.
Sure, yeah.
And the animation will help you explain what you said earlier about biomechanics, applying biomechanics to this case.
Right, exactly.
Okay, some permission to publish this to the jury, Your Honor.
Just, we assert our ongoing objection to the animations or cartoons. They lack foundation, distort the reality, and are incomplete.
So animation number 5 is received for
Gotta get it on the
demonstrative
record.
purposes only to help this witness explain his testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So yeah,
So,
even
Dr.
though that
Scheer, I'm
objection was
gonna
going to lose, it's better to
let
get it on the
you
record.
Take the reins here and use it as you need to explain. Okay.
Thank
Is
you.
that all right?
Can we?
Your Honor, we also object to the extent that this witness hasn't testified to any of the placement of any of the other skiers or bodies in this animation.
Mr. Egan, is that relevant to this witness's testimony of the other skiers?
No, he's going to talk about the collision itself.
So you should ignore any of the other skiers that are shown in the animation.
Okay, so you can reverse it, Dr. Scheer, to just before the collision, so we can focus on that and explain what you mean to show by this animation.
Maybe I can't. How do you?
You could press play again, and it will get to it.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So take us through, if you would, Dr. Scheer, what this animation shows from your point of view as a biomechanics expert.
Sure. The first thing that you should be aware of is that this is Miss Paltrow's version of the events. So,
Dr. Scheer, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh.
Just maybe pull your mic.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry
there
about
you
that. The first thing to be aware of is this is Miss Paltrow's version of the events. So that's what we're showing here. And as we move forward, I'll talk about the physics, kind of like what I drew earlier with the center of mass and the rotation. And that's the idea. That's what went into this. But again, this is not exactly what happened. This is just one of the possible ways it could have happened. So we have Miss Paltrow in black, Mr. Sanderson in the blue as they move forward in time. It's her testimony that his skis slid between hers. There we go. She felt a contact directly in the back, along her back. It sounded like her buttocks as well. The person was grunting, pressing against her, but they were on their skis for a period of time. If in this situation, he's also moving to skier's right, which is in the left in this image, that will create, remember I had the force that was offset from the center of mass. That's going to create a rightward motion for her, but also create some initial rotation. Now, in this portion, there's a number of possibilities. She could be adding weight to her right ski because of the contact from Mr. Sanderson. When you ski, if you're in, let's just take a snowplow or what my kids call pizza position. If you weight the right ski, you turn left. So if she weights the right ski here more because of the contact, she's going to turn counterclockwise. The contact from Mr. Sanderson, if it's more to the right, will turn her counterclockwise. So as they're moving to the right here, there would be some counterclockwise rotation. And here, her ski can catch, or she could pitch to the side, or they could both pitch to the side. They could both lose balance. We're not sure what happens. But as they're rotating, they're continuing to fall. And Miss Paltrow's version has them spooning essentially as they're coming down together, which would make sense if their legs got caught up. If he was contacting her below her center of mass, where his right leg was contacting her right leg, her thigh in that area. Also consistent with Miss Paltrow saying that her right knee was splayed open at the end and she felt right knee discomfort. That all could happen there. So as she's rotating and he's rotating counterclockwise, they fall to the side. Now, at this point here in the animation, I guess maybe the next frame, if I can do it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how this would fit with what she said.
Mr. Sanderson lands on his right side, maybe the right back. It's hard to say. If he lands on his right side, kind of like Dr. Boehm said, he needs to land on the elbow. That can happen. That can create lateral rib fractures. But that's not the only way. His arm could be out. He can land on the side and create lateral rib fractures. He could land on his side and a little bit towards the back, and Miss Paltrow could land on him. She could be fully on him, maybe with her buttocks or her back or some portion of her mass compresses his chest front to back, and that can create his rib fractures. There's a lot of different ways this could happen. I can't tell which one of those is right, but all of those are consistent with her version of the events.
Yeah.
As they hit the snow, they would continue to move forward until friction slows them down. And it's also important to note, we haven't talked about the head injury, but hitting the back of the head or the side of the head, he could have his head turned. All of those are possibilities for him to contact his head on the snow. So that's not inconsistent as well.
Would it be helpful to show it in real time? You've been doing it kind of slow motion, which has also been very helpful. Maybe start from this beginning and just play it.
Objection lacks foundation for trajectory, speed, and direction.
Overruled. It's demonstrative of this witness's testimony only.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I see in the chat some folks are having some discomfort with the fact that he's saying that
the beginning.
This could have happened, that could happen.
If there's anything you want to comment on as it happens, feel free.
That's what he has to do. I mean, he can't say this absolutely happened, right? Because he's making calculations. Essentially it's a theory of what happened, and that's what the other side's experts were doing as well.
I think that
they were just using different things like
the version that
the placement of
Ms.
the rib
Paltrow
fractures
testified to that matches the laws of physics and biomechanics as I understand them.
And would it be helpful to show, there's one other animation that has a little zoom in from the other angle. Would that also be helpful?
I think, it can't hurt.
Let's show that then. Permission to approach, Your Honor, for that.
And remember, he also is basically rebutting Dr. Bain's testimony. Dr. Bain said there's no way this could have happened other than she hit him.
Zoomed inside.
What was the last one, James?
Number 5. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Wait just a second.
Okay, Dr. Sure. So I'm playing you number 4, the zoomed in from the side version.
I feel like there's an airplane style joke in this too.
As well.
Yes, this is the same animation, but from a different camera view.
Got it. And will this animation also help you explain the same things you've been going over with the jury?
It's the same thing, sure. Yeah, I think it also visualizes, it illustrates my opinion.
Okay. Your Honor, permission to show this animation.
Subject to the same objections by the plaintiffs, the animation 4 zoomed inside is received for demonstrative purposes only.
Sorry, I'm preemptively cracking myself up. I can just envision James being like, "But are you sure?" And the witness is like,
Dr. Sure,
yeah,
maybe since we've already gone
Sure.
through this slow motion, let's just play this one from the start, and
Another
then you can
terrible joke. I'm sorry.
add anything that you can provide to the jury from this angle.
Sure. Here, let's play first, and then there we go. I'll wait until the contact point. So it's coming up. Here we go. There's contact, fall to the right. This one doesn't show the rotation quite as much, and we don't know the amount of counterclockwise rotation as well. There could be a little, there could be more or less.
Right.
We're not sure.
But if you go backwards a little bit into the moment of the collision, this one maybe shows. Does this one show the skis coming between the skis?
Yes, it does. And I think it's better visualized in this one.
Yeah, and again, what's the significance of that in terms of how the mechanism of the fall occurs?
Well, that's Miss Paltrow's testimony, and
Carl
it
Twig, that's a
works
good one.
for the physics
I
of them
appreciate that.
falling and rotating slightly counterclockwise. Frankly, if it wasn't both skis, if it was one ski between hers, the kinematics would be the same. For example, if his right ski were on the outside of her right ski, it wouldn't change the general kinematics. This is generally, and I keep saying generally because we don't know the exact details of it, this would work.
So if we flipped the positions of the parties and Mr. Sanderson was in front, Ms. Paltrow came from behind, using this as a good visual for the jury, we explain that your opinions about what we would expect to happen on Mr. Ramon's account, I should say.
Well, Mr. Ramon's account is very different because in Mr. Ramon's account, Mr. Sanderson goes spread eagle and his skis go out into that V and the inside edges catch. And that changes the kinematics, the motion. It's a very different version of what happens with the contact.
And in terms, I guess we've covered that. So maybe we'll wrap up here. You've covered a lot of things, a lot of new things perhaps for members of the jury and those of us in the room. Will you summarize for us what are the main points that you want to get across for the jury here?
Sure. The first is that Dr. Boehm cannot say with any accuracy that Miss Paltrow landed on Mr. Sanderson. His calculations are wrong. And when you look at the equations done properly, Mr. Sanderson can land on the snow and sustain his injuries without Miss Paltrow falling on him.
And if I may, Dr. Schur, was it your understanding that Dr. Boehm's opinion was that his account was the only possible way the injuries could occur?
That's exactly
yes, Mr. Ramon's version was the only possible way. He said Miss Paltrow's was impossible, which I believe is false. I think Miss Paltrow's version is possible.
Right. And would you say that Miss Paltrow's is the more likely of the two accounts?
Well, considering it's the only one that matches with the physics of what would happen in contact, yes, I think so.
Okay, and I interrupted you. You were going through your main points. What was the next one?
Oh, I think we've covered it. The second thing is that Dr. Boehm cannot say that Miss Paltrow's version is impossible. That's absolutely wrong.
It sounds like you're saying, in contrast to Dr. Boehm, that there are various ways this accident could have happened. The injuries could have occurred for Mr. Sanderson. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you've evaluated the various testimony, correct?
I have.
And you've done a careful analysis from a biomechanical engineer's perspective on what different scenarios might be likely or how they would happen, correct?
Correct.
And is it your opinion that Miss Paltrow's version is the more likely of the two versions that you looked at, Mr. Ramon's and Miss Paltrow?
Yes. Once again, it's the only version out of the two that matches with the laws of physics, the biomechanics of it.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell the jury that maybe I interrupted you on and you missed out on?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. And that's all for now.
Excellent witness.
Can you keep the screen there?
Sure.
You can turn it
I
off.
do want to see
Well,
Cross.
Actually, leave it on for right now.
What's going to happen?
On or off?
On.
Okay.
Okay, here's where we find out where the rubber meets the road.
You prefer Dr. Schur?
Sure, that works.
Sure, Dr. Schur?
I feel like just call him Dr. Schur. Like that's just the default is the more respectful in a courtroom setting.
Can you back it up about to here on the scroll?
To here?
Yeah, and then go forward it out halfway between the last one. Okay, a little farther. Just before when Mr. Sanderson, who's also
Maybe it's easier if you do it.
well, could you just go a little bit farther forward? Just go slow. I just want to get Mr. Sanderson, who's sometimes called Dr. Sanderson. Mr. Chair, would you mind putting on the remote?
That allows you to be picked up.
Okay, how about use this?
Sure. Yeah.
Does that work? Is this working? Oh, wait, now it is. Okay, go a little farther forward, please. Okay, and then when we get, okay. Now, this is Terry Sanderson.
That's Mr. Sanderson, that's right.
Okay. So his right eye is, okay, go a little farther. Now, just another thing, fractions, a little bit farther. Okay. So you have his head turned. That's based on your testimony that he is looking down the hill, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
I believe his testimony is that he's looking at a woman who's a little downhill to the left. He notices her, looks at her. I don't remember what the exact words are.
Okay, go a little farther. So his head, his left eye would be looking directly at Miss
Laying your
Paltrow.
mic.
He would see her, right?
I believe so.
And it's inconsistent with his testimony. He didn't see her at all
That's correct.
because, but he would see her there, wouldn't he?
I would think so.
Okay, go a little farther, just another fraction. Okay. Now, in this picture, you don't have Craig Ramon in there. How far above would this point be? Where I just pointed. How many yards would that be above this image right here?
I don't know without doing a measurement, but I'm concentrating on the collision between Mr. Sanderson and Miss Paltrow.
Well, Craig Ramon testifies he was about 30 to 40 feet above. So these objects are about bent over, maybe 5 feet high. So if you just flop over, 6 bodies, we'd get to 30 feet. That would be about right here.
I'm not sure.
Well, you're an engineer, highly trained PhD. You can't even guesstimate that that would be about 30 feet.
I can't tell.
Would up here be 30 feet? Don't you think it'd be a lot more than 30 feet?
Probably, but I don't know.
Well, you helped create this animation. You don't know the distances in your own animation?
No, I've concentrated on the collision portion. That's the biomechanics portion.
Okay, who did the estimates or guesstimates of the distances of the bodies of the other people?
So that's going to be
He's doing a direct
Mr.
examination.
Boggart, who's going to be on
This is
scene
not a
next.
cross-examination.
Okay, so this animation doesn't have Craig Ramon in the scene at all.
Not at this point.
Okay. Is it because the defense doesn't want him in the scene, so to discredit his witness account?
Oh, I don't think that's the case at all. You'll have to ask Mr. Boggart.
Okay, we will.
Ugh,
Okay, let's see.
This
Just go another little section.
this is so painful.
You just tell me when. I'll keep going until
Yeah,
you say
just
stop.
go slow. I just want to go slow motion. Okay, now stop right there. Now, do you know the time, how much time from the initial, let's say, impact of their bodies to this point would be? You did this calculation. This is your bailiwick. What you're talking about
Do you mean in the animation or do you mean in real
right
life?
now. Yeah, from the impact to this point, approximately, like a fourth of a second, a half a second, a tenth of a second. Do you?
Ms. Paltrow says that they're in contact for a little while, a few seconds before they fall over. So I don't know what it is in particular in this animation, if that's what you're asking.
So You helped design this part of the animation, so you don't know how far it is. You just guessed it.
Again, we don't
He's
know
really
exact
on about this
timing and
distance
distance.
between
This
them.
represents an illustration of the version. So, yeah, it is what it is.
It's an illustration of the version, but there could be wide variability in that version, right?
There is variability, but we have constraints on it.
And the constraints are
Terrible cross.
could have happened the opposite way, right?
The opposite way.
Miss Paltrow hit Terry Sanderson.
No, I don't think
Just
so.
ask yes or
Not
no
with
question.
the testimony that's given. We have two versions. We have Mr. Ramon's version, and we have Miss Paltrow's version. This is Miss Paltrow's version. Mr. Ramon's version is very different.
Well, what
Okay.
about the distance between those
Let's
guys
talk
and the
about that
animation?
for a second.
I'm sorry. This is so ineffective. Just make it snappy. Ask some yes or no questions.
You're being paid.
Okay, now we get to the payment portion.
Was it
It's next-
$4.25 an hour for this?
And worth every penny.
Is it more than $4.25 an hour?
It is.
$4.50 an hour?
Yep.
500?
It's 500 an hour.
500 an hour.
Do we hear 500? Do we hear 550?
And,
550. Do we hear 600?
$10,000 so far for your work?
That sounds about right.
More than 15,000?
No, I don't think so.
So between 10 and 15,000. Okay. You can turn that off for right now.
I think that's probably better.
Oh, please leave it there.
Oh.
Let me come back to it.
What's the best way to do I just disconnect it? Is that that? Okay.
Just because, I mean, fair. It's Gwyneth's mixed with Eric Christensen's version. But their interests, like their testimony, they work together, right? They don't conflict exactly. So, and when we're talking about the actual impact, we only have Gwyneth Paltrow's version and Craig Ramon's version, because Craig Ramon is the only third party witness that says that he actually saw
No,
it.
you're here to teach
How well he saw it,
the jury, right? The
question,
defendant's version,
but it seems
correct?
undisputed that he
Teach
actually
the
saw it.
jury the physics that would be helpful in understanding how to assess the accident.
So that's a no. You're not teaching the defendant's version.
I'm not teaching any version. I'm teaching the physics and mechanical engineering, biomechanical engineering that would help the jury.
I
Nice.
know it's
Good
hard for
answer.
expert witnesses to say yes or no, but are you teaching the defendant's version?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Okay. Seemed like a simple
It's
question.
it's just the math, sir.
Next, I'd like to talk about, did you review Dr. Gibby's testimony at trial?
No, but I did see some of his trial testimony.
All of it or some of it?
Some of it.
Was it more than 10 minutes?
Probably, yeah.
More than 20 minutes?
Yeah.
More than an hour?
I don't think more than an hour.
Okay.
It was fun playing guess.
You
game
didn't
with you guys.
disclose anything about hearing Dr. Gibby's testimony.
I'm not sure what you mean, but I did see it.
Lucky,
Okay.
thank you so much for gifting 10 Legal Bites memberships. So kind and generous of you once
You've
again.
never
I
disclosed
know you've
to
gifted them before
the
many
plaintiff
times.
your reports
And everybody
or
that's
your testimony
now in the
ahead of
club,
this trial,
welcome by
correct?
club.
May we approach?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now I should have mentioned. If only I would have known that they were going to approach with an objection. Lucky, thank you so much for gifting those memberships. There are a bunch of people that now 10 people now are part of Bite Club from in the chat. So on Fridays we usually do a members only live stream. So we talk about just all kinds of stuff. Often law related, not always though. Just kind of hang out. Casual Friday stream. This Friday, I don't know that I will be doing it. I will probably be streaming this trial instead. So, but after that, we'll be getting back into our usual regular programming. What's the word? So yeah. This cross-examination is horrible. He's basically doing his own direct examination of this guy. And what I mean when I say that is he's asking open-ended questions, or at least questions that are not as tight as they could be. On cross-examination, there are many different styles, right? My preferred style is ask as tight a question as you can, get in, get out, make it short, make it snappy, so that you basically come in, you essentially come in from behind and undercut them, clip them at their knees, leave them behind so that they're laying in the snow, so to speak. Maybe that's a bad metaphor for this trial. But anyway, you guys, you know what I mean. Get in, get out before anybody gets hurt. Some other cross-examinations that we've seen have actually been effective, even though it wasn't my favorite. There have been some good ones. And especially when it comes to expert witnesses, sometimes you kind of have to be a little more fluid with your questions because you are wrestling with someone who is an expert in their field. So that can be hard. But this cross-examination is not working. I don't know. I would love to see the jury right now. Are they actually even paying attention? Because there's a lot of dead air in between. There's a lot of opportunities for them to lose focus, and then several questions.
Are you an expert on broken ribs?
I don't know what's going on.
I am comfortable talking about the biomechanics related to rib fractures.
Have you done any papers or studies or research on ribs and rib fractures?
Me personally, no, but I've read the biomechanical and engineering literature relevant to them.
Okay. You haven't mentioned that biomechanical literature in specifics, correct?
I'm not sure about in specifics, but I think we mentioned it on direct.
Okay. So you said that Dr. Sanderson, or I'm just going to call him Terry. Terry was 70 years old at the time of this crash.
Oh, Dr. Sanderson?
He's 69, but effectively 70 for biomechanics purposes.
Effectively because 70 years older?
No, because there's actually good information in the biomechanical engineering literature about the amount of chest compression required to create rib fractures for 70-year-olds.
In other words, that's actually even...
Well, it's actually the full distribution, but the paper that I'm thinking of from Agnew specifically talks about 70-year-olds.
You didn't mention that paper today.
No, but would you like it?
Not right now, thanks.
Probably doesn't help my
I've
case.
not seen it. Let's see. I'm going to go right to another point. You have this theory of rotation, correct? That the version you're calling Miss Paltrow's version is a kind of a rotation version?
There is some rotation. It may be a little. It might be more than a little. We don't know.
Okay, so we don't know how much rotation there is, correct?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to... Let me see what this thing works. It didn't work last time. Guess it's working now. May we take a picture of this?
I think you've already done it.
Okay.
Or someone on your team has.
Okay, good. May I borrow a pen?
Your Honor, we would object to him writing on the witness's board.
It's not an exhibit. It's certainly fair game.
Okay.
So
Well,
Doctor-
can we mark it as an exhibit, Your Honor?
Why don't you take a picture of it and you can use that and then he can
Go ahead,
add,
take a
he can
picture.
add to it.
Okay.
It is our board.
Right, and in academic
We
fields,
don't have any questions right now, so.
in academic fields, it's common that people write on each other's drawings, correct?
I don't know that I've seen that, but I don't have a problem with you drawing.
Okay. So you testified that Craig Ramon says Terry was hit directly in the back and they went down, and Craig Ramon was somewhere above 30 to 40 feet. And it happened in a fraction of a second, correct?
Yes, the fall, I would agree with that.
Okay, less than a second.
Sure.
Okay. So there was a scream. So and the scream occurred, and there was within a fraction of a second. And I don't believe Craig Ramon never testified where Miss Paltrow's skis were.
Correct.
So her skis could have been going underneath Terry like this.
But
So the pink ones
Okay.
would be Miss Paltrow's skis. Is that a version that is possible?
It is not.
It's
probably because of the tip of her skis.
uh,
They would have gone up over
you're
his.
saying it's not possible.
That is not possible with the version that Mr. Ramon
Oh.
states.
His version didn't talk about her
laughing.
skis. Now here, I'll draw what her body. The pink would be her body, still square in the back. Isn't that possible?
So, no, with Mr. Ramon's version, if I may, that is not possible. So, in this situation here, when Mr. Sanderson's skis go into a V, and I guess you're saying her skis are under his skis, which I'm not sure how that happens because the tips
Yeah.
curve up,
Yeah,
but we'll go with it.
exactly. We'll go
Somehow,
with it.
she winds up in this situation getting caught with her left ski around Mr. Sanderson, and she would not continue past 5 to 10 feet, and I would expect a twisting release of her left ski.
Well, that's her version. I'm talking about Mr. Ramon's version.
No. I'm talking about what you just drew for Mr. Ramon's version.
Mr. Ramon's version. Well, isn't it possible her skis could be pointing straight like this? And let me get it right here.
He's just so amused by this
Yeah,
this
so
theory.
she could be
You can
going
tell that
straight
he's just like, I
and
mean,
she could be turning
this is
left
ridiculous, but okay.
and up and hit square in the back, but her skis are pointed this way. Isn't that another version?
So for her skis to miss, oh no, it's not.
Mark Taylor,
Do you want me to
I
explain?
appreciate this pun.
In a second.
We're just grasping at skis here.
So
I might adopt that.
So are you saying that her body could not be turned while her skis are going in one direction or she's turning up to the left? Is that possible?
Not for Mr. Ramon's version. Is it possible in general? Sure. But in her version, I'm sorry, in his version, no.
This happened in a fraction of a second. I don't think Mr. Ramon testified that he has a videographic or photographic memory. Do you?
Well, he's pretty particular in his testimony about how she was on Mr. Sanderson's back.
Right, and he could, you see the circle I have? Let's see, well, actually.
He's trying so hard not to laugh.
Wrong. Let's do
Just
it
so
the
long
other
as he
way.
doesn't start to look condescending. Like if he looks amused, that's one
body
thing, but
like
you don't want
this.
the jury to get turned off by it either.
And her skis could be like this too. And people turn all the time while they're skiing, and their skis are going one direction, but their body is pointing a different. Right here. Can you see me? You see that?
I see you turning, sure.
That's possible, right?
What you're doing in general is possible. Are you asking, does that match with Mr. Ramon's testimony? No, and I'm happy to explain why.
I think Mr. Ramon's testimony is, it happens in a fraction of a second. Mr. Ramon
Doesn't matter.
professional wannabe freestyle
I want to
skier,
hear why it doesn't make sense. I want
likes to
redirect
talk
on this
about
now.
ski angles, but the main part is the body.
He's not going to
You
allow
saw
him
the
to
body,
explain why
and then the
he
bodies
thinks
go down
that's
together,
impossible.
and she lands on top of him. You're saying that your versions, which are not based on anything except your recreation of the biomechanics, are superior to an eyewitness. Isn't that what you're saying?
No, we have two versions of the accident. We have Mr. Ramon's version.
There you go.
And we have Miss Paltrow's version. I've assessed
Basing it on
both
one constellation
using
of facts
physics and
or the other.
biomechanics. And I'm sorry to say, Mr. Ramon's version does not meet with the laws of physics. It's not consistent, internally consistent, and Miss Paltrow's is.
Okay.
Well, I don't think Mr. Ramon's version was designed to be consistent with the version of events. It happened in less than a
Well,
second.
it's not designed to meet with
And,
physics. What are you
we don't
talking
know the
about?
direction of the skis. In his version, he never testified to the direction of Ms. Paltrow's skis in any of his testimony. Isn't that true?
He did not testify to the direction of her skis. That's true.
Thank you. So if Ms. Paltrow was seen down, turning up to the left, she hits Terry Sanderson square in the back, and they can fall down to the right, especially if her momentum.
If she's skiing under his
is
skis?
going, well, I'm
From
not
an
a
angle?
biomechanical engineer. I'll try to do it right here. It could be her shoulder that hits him square in the back, couldn't it? He didn't say what part of Miss Paltrow's body hit Mr. Sanderson, did he?
He did not say. He said, well, here, I can tell you exactly what he said. He said,
Take your time.
Having an expert witness that knows exactly what the testimony was and has it down pat is chef's kiss.
he said squarely in the back. She couldn't have hit him in the back any better right in the middle than if she tried. And she couldn't have been back on his back any more than if he would have strapped her on the back, like a backpack.
That doesn't mean her body was straight.
Might not be exactly straight.
But she was right
Yeah, it
on
could be
his
off
back
center.
like a backpack.
She was skiing down,
She's like
this,
Yoda
and
on
she
Luke's back.
hits him right in the back. Or maybe it was a little off center because Mr. Ramon only had the view for a few seconds. And then her arms could have wrapped around Terry Sanderson, right?
I don't think there's any testimony about that. Is it possible? Maybe, but
Well,
I don't
where
think
would
there's
they have
testimony.
gone? Down to the side? She went in like this?
In front of her,
I mean, the most likely, don't skiers ski like this usually?
often.
Often? What are the other positions?
They can have her arms in more,
Okay,
can have them out more,
so she could be like
have her arms
this
down
and
to her
turn like
side,
this.
and the poles heading back. There's
Okay.
all sorts of options.
So in that fraction of a second, Mr. Ramon
Tons of
saw
options.
the collision. The screen
Choose your
was up
adventure.
here. He turns his head, and she could hit him square in the back. She could have her, at that point, her body could have turned and possibly hit her, but the point is the skis could have been going at a different angle.
How could she hit him squarely in the
One
back
or
if
the
her
other,
skis were at an angle then?
and still cause
That
this
doesn't make
crash.
sense.
And your versions assume those are not possible because you assume that there's only one way that their skis were going parallel to each other. This is
I think he
this is
just
your
wants an
only assumption,
opportunity to
right?
draw lines through his drawing.
You made assumptions that these are
Like, I don't
possible,
want this anymore.
I
Get rid of
looked
it.
at other angles. That's right.
Make some X's through it.
and the testimony though, you said there's no testimony about the angle of her skis from Mr. Ramon, correct?
That's true.
Such a fantastic witness. I'm loving it. I am loving all of it. He's doing so well on cross-examination.
You've made a lot of assumptions, correct, to make these animations, right?
Yes and no.
I thought that would be
It's a good answer.
more than one assumption.
There are
That's
some
yes or no?
assumptions. Sure, more than one assumption.
Less than 100?
Sure.
Less than 10?
I don't know.
You don't know how many assumptions you've made, correct?
That's right. Sure.
Okay.
I mean, hopefully the jury is matching his expression, because if they're not, that can be very off-putting for them if they're not tracking his
counsel-
incredulity right now.
Mr.
But
Owens likes to
I'm
do
matching
this
it
a
for
lot,
sure.
Like it's a touchdown. But on redirect, Mr. Ramon, did you see all of his testimony for this trial?
I don't know if I saw all of it, but certainly I saw a lot of it.
Yeah, has one. It
Okay.
could be a turnoff
You saw the
for
testimony
the
last
jury.
week, correct?
So that's why I
Is
said,
there
like,
any more than that?
I
There was a
sincerely
little bit
hope that they are
yesterday.
matching his
I didn't see any
expression.
Had nothing to
yesterday. I
do
was
with this.
traveling.
Had to do with that Mr. Ramon reported what he saw the same day in the same week 7 years ago. And you're recreating this, what, about 5 months ago, correct?
I don't remember when it was.
Less than a year ago.
I don't recall.
You don't recall when you made your consulted with Mr.
He's
Burrell
not
and made
relying
the
on
animation?
memory. Who
This
cares
has
when
been
he made
ongoing
it?
for a while. This case has been dragging on, so I don't know when it was.
Mark Taylor, thank you so much for this generous super chat. You're very welcome.
So
this has been,
you've
a lot of fun
working
for
on
me as
this
well.
for
Glad you're here.
let's say more than 8 months.
Sure.
You don't know?
Certainly, we've been in contact with counsel for longer than 8 months.
And for the record, Your Honor, I'd like to move to strike all of his testimony because this wasn't disclosed improperly.
What?
I anticipate the
All
I
of
just
his
wanna, for the record,
testimony?
make the rule.
It's overruled. It was disclosed properly, counsel.
Okay.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? You want to motion
What
to
I'd like to
strike his
do is,
entire testimony, and also you're wrong. You're wrong about the fact
Understand
that,
that
that you say
Made a
that they
lot of
didn't disclose it.
assumptions. And the jury would like to know
You're just saying
how reliable
this
your opinions
guy is
are.
really bad for my
So
case.
how can
Please
that
make him
be
go away,
reliable
Judge.
when you totally discount some major events like what the direction of Miss Paltrow's body was compared to her skis? And there is testimony about
Guitar, thank
Ms.
you so much for the
Paltrow's,
super chat.
uh,
I'm glad
body
you found this
movement.
enjoyable.
Um,
And
do you
thank
know
you for
that?
being here. This is great.
I guess I don't
prior to the
understand.
crash, just prior to the crash.
What version are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Do you know about the version of Carrie Oakes?
I don't think she saw the accident.
Have you read her deposition?
I have.
Okay. You realize she testified that one of the kids said, "Mommy, watch us ski." And the kids were up there on the left. Miss Paltrow was down on the right, which would tend to show that Miss Paltrow was looking up to her
Why
left.
didn't they
at the point of
call
collision?
Carrie Oakes? We
I don't
haven't
recall
seen
that.
her yet.
Okay.
If she's so good for the plaintiff's side, why didn't they call her?
So you're
And Kenneth
you're
Sitter,
excluding
Sitters, it's
Carrie Oakes'
the phrase we're
testimony,
going with
correct?
today is
That's wrong.
grasping at skis.
You're including her testimony,
I considered it. Sure.
and you
But yeah, you're right.
are there any assumptions you've made based on her testimony?
Not in particular that I can think of, but there may be.
So could you speak up?
Not in particular that I can think of.
Okay. Not particularly that you can think of about Carrie Oakes' testimony. Okay. Are you an expert on head injuries?
I'm comfortable talking about head injuries from the biomechanics standpoint.
Have you ever studied
No, not
or
necessarily. I don't
held
know.
yourself out as
What
an
was
expert
that?
on concussion?
That's somebody who
If it's diagnosing
really
or treating
trying.
concussion, no. If it's the biomechanics related to the formation of concussion, yes, I've done helmet research and head injury research, in particular for snow sports.
Did you apply any of your knowledge about concussion to this case?
I certainly looked at it, but Dr. Boehm was very particular in his testimony that it was only the rib fractures that allowed him to say that Ms. Paltrow contacted Mr. Sanderson from behind. So that's what I concentrated on for the jury.
And you ignored his discussion about the head injury.
Oh, no, I certainly considered it.
And it's not relevant in this case.
Well, in disproving Dr. Boehm, it's not relevant, but I'm happy to talk about it.
So he's also
It's not
turning
clear
and
you've
looking at the
disproved
jury
Dr.
right now.
Bain
I have a
when
feeling they're
Don't
probably
even know the
matching his
direction of Miss
expression.
Paltrow's skis at the beginning of this. It's also, I think, a big assumption to say what the body position of Miss Paltrow was when she hit Terry Sanderson in the back.
Sustained, and I don't, was there a question in there?
Just if that was accurate, I'll withdraw it.
Half the time I feel like most of these attorneys are just like flying by the seat of their pants. Like they didn't actually prep like a real direct or cross-examination. That's the impression that I get. And maybe it's just because of how casual they are. Maybe it's their style. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that, but that's just.
So you never studied rib injuries. Have you ever testified about rib injuries before?
Could you clarify what the question is?
Have you ever studied rib injuries and testified about them in the past?
That sounds like two questions.
Have you ever testified about rib injuries in the past?
Sounds like a compound question.
I
He's
don't
like
recall,
flagging to
but
the
it's
attorney.
likely.
Want to object?
Most likely you have.
I think so.
How many?
They're
Have you
common.
testified more than 100 times?
In trial, probably 35 times, something in that ballpark.
That's actually more than I had
In total,
expected.
under oath, have you testified more than 100 times?
Including depositions, yes.
More than less than 200 times?
I would agree with that.
So 100 to 200. Okay. So probably a lot of depositions or a lot of cases where he testified, he formulated an opinion, and then they settled. That's the majority of his cases that he's been involved in. I mean, well, more than the majority. It's like 3 times the number that he's testified in trial. I'm surprised though that there have been 35 cases that he's been involved in that have gone to trial at this point. Oh my God. This cross-examination just burst into flames. As soon as
Thank you, Dr. Scher.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bueller. Mr. Egan?
Nicole Corn, thank you so much for the super sticker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Scher, we'll just be real quick here. Did anything Mr. Bueller asked you change your opinion that Ms. Paltrow's account is consistent with the laws of physics to your understanding and Mr. Ramon's is not?
That remains the same.
Thanks.
Mr. Bueller?
I think you said this before, that you're an expert in the laws of physics, but you're not an expert in medical medicine or orthopedics or neurology, correct?
I am a biomechanical engineer. I am not a medical doctor. I do not diagnose and treat, but I do look at what forces and what motions create damage to the body.
Thank you.
You may step down.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I call your next witness?
Amazing witness. Round of applause.
Paul Bogger, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, before Mr. Bogger comes up to testify, we may want to take a 5 or 10-minute break. I want to address something with the court outside the presence.
We need to lick our wounds, Your
We'll
Honor.
have to take one shortly anyway, so let's go ahead and do it now.
Your Honor, we would like a break so that we can go to the bathroom and change our underwear after that cross-examination because that was a complete disaster for our case. And that witness was too good for the plaintiff's side. I mean, look, here's the thing. When it comes to these expert witnesses, we're not looking for them to say 100% this is what happened, right? Because they're experts. They're not. Oh gosh. Okay. Maybe are we gonna get into some discussion here?
Your Honor, pursuant to
here
our
we go.
motion in limiting
pause.
Mr. Bogger's testimony is going to be significantly limited in this case. The problem that I am foreseeing is that I could be wrong, but it appears to me that counsel is going to try and use Mr. Bogger to then describe some further animations and place individuals on that animation. And I have significant concerns with that for a number of reasons. Number one, Mr. Bogger's not qualified to do that. He didn't take any kind of measurements, calculations, determinations of speed, force, physics, etc. in this case. But in addition, in his report, he does not make any mention of where people were, where they were placed. Any kind of discussion of him talking about the animation, and if he was responsible for putting the people somehow on that animation, he does not describe that in his report. He doesn't talk that in his report regarding participating in an animation. He provides no diagrams in his report, no discussions of where people were or weren't. So I don't think that it would be appropriate for him to even deal with the animation, or that his testimony that he's the one that was responsible for putting, say, Apple here and Moses here and that type of thing. That would go significantly beyond anything he did in his report. So that's my concern, and I wanted to address that now rather than a sidebar.
Thank you. Sure. Mr. Egan?
Yes, Your Honor. So I think our response would be that Mr. Bogger has poured over the records in this case, and he has, in producing these animations, made certain assumptions about what testimony might be consistent with the illustration that the animations provide. He can be very clear with the jury that he's assuming certain facts. He's not finding these facts. He's assuming that they're true. They come from the record. He can explain that they're rough illustrations. He's not made measurements and decided that, yes, this is exactly 30 feet. He can be subject to cross-examination on any point that might be inconsistent with testimony. He can explain that he chose to assume these facts and not other facts, and that if you assumed other facts, you might get different illustration. And then he will explain that the assumption of various facts that are shown in the animations are consistent with his understanding of ski collisions and skiing generally, which he has decades of experience, not just with skiing himself, but with investigating accidents, collisions, hundreds and hundreds of them for various purposes, mostly not litigation, mostly to figure out risk management concerns, deciding whether certain skiers have to be banned from a certain resort or a ski area. He has ample experience to be able to discuss how to consider various factors in evaluating a ski collision like this that has complex testimony that's not all consistent. And the jury, in our view, needs to hear from a ski expert that knows how to do that and can explain to them the principles that he uses. He will not tell the jury this is likely what happened, or that I have found that this must be the case. He'll say, I've assumed these facts. He can be very clear about what he's assumed, and then use that animation to explain to the jury how to think through the case, given his ample experience with evaluating ski collisions.
So, Mr. Egan, I guess I'm still not hearing an expert opinion from Mr. Bogger, is it? Mm-hmm. That would have helped the jury. I mean, everything that I'm hearing has him weighing evidence, has him making decisions about what may have happened on that day. And that's invading the providence of the jury. It's not really going to help them.
Your Honor, I see it as like, say, a medical malpractice case, which I'm more familiar with. If a certain set of facts might be in the record about what happened in a surgery, for example, then a surgeon, expert surgeon who has lots of experience reviewing records, but also doing the surgery himself, knowing what the training is, looks at the records, looks at the various claims, and you, as you said in your order ruling, I believe yesterday, can say, if we assume these facts, given my expertise, I can say this makes sense, or this is consistent with my understanding of surgery. Yeah. And so,
is he going to be an expert or a lay witness? My proposal is that
we use Mr. Bogger in that sort of way, where he can help the jury understand, given what he knows about skiing, and given what he's seen in the record, that there are certain principles you can use if you assume certain facts to evaluate a certain collision, such that your applying some rational principles rather than just generally going with a certain gestalt feeling about what someone said. You're actually trying to rationally go through how to evaluate a ski collision, which again, he has decades and decades of experience doing. And he won't say, he'll say to the jury, you're the ones that have to decide what happened. This is a very difficult case to decide.
Isn't your medical malpractice expert example, isn't that an expert that's coming in to evaluate whether the standard of care was breached?
Yeah, well, so yes, usually we would offer an expert in that way, but given your ruling, I'm just trying to use that as an analogy where we could still use expertise that would help the jury without rendering that final opinion, telling them, as an expert, you should do this, and I'm really the one that knows because I have tons of experience. Instead, he can say, here's how I evaluate these accidents, and let me show you how to do it. And then they have rational principles that come from his field of skiing and ski accident evaluation that help them, that they haven't heard from any ski expert that has provided to them that kind of a rational layout for analyzing the various complex claims in this case. And I think that would help them. Sure.
And I think in my preliminary ruling on this witness yesterday, I'm losing track of the days here.
Yeah, me too.
I think I stated that he is qualified, certainly has qualifications, and can testify as to what a reasonable skier would do or not do in a certain hypothetical set of facts. But in terms of applying and weighing the evidence in this case, I think that goes too far.
Okay, so but if we showed the animation and we made it clear to the jury that we're assuming certain facts, we're not weighing them. We're just saying, look, let's take these facts. We're assuming them. We're not saying that they're proven. We're just showing you how to analyze the facts, assuming these various parts of the testimony are true. That would be too far, you're saying?
That sounds like closing argument. It doesn't sound like what a witness can offer under Rule 702. He can talk about, he's an expert in skiing. He can talk about skiing dynamics. He can explain what a snowplow is, what parallel skiing is, what the rules of skiing are generally understood to be. But in terms of taking that next leap, I don't think he can say, I've looked at the deposition testimony and I can tell you who's at fault here, or I can tell you who did something wrong here. I just don't see, I think that's the jury's responsibility. And I don't want a witness telling the jury how to make its decisions or how to make a decision that's either an ultimate issue or one of the issues leading up to that ultimate issue.
So even him explaining his process for how to evaluate ski collisions would be too far?
To what end? Why does the jury need to know how he evaluates a ski collision?
Because evaluating ski collisions is a complex matter and he has expertise as to how to do that.
Yeah. Right now I'm just talking I'm responding to your question sort of in a vacuum. I don't know what it is he's offering.
If it would help, I could give you kind of an example. Like,
sure.
If I could say, Mr. Bogger, when you evaluate ski collisions and you've evaluated, have established that he's evaluated hundreds of ski collisions. Have you ever evaluated collisions where there's conflicting testimony? Yes. When you approach that testimony, what are principles you use to evaluate that? And he can explain those principles. He doesn't have to talk about the facts of this case. He can explain, here are these principles. I don't think the jury's heard that. I think it would be helpful to them. I think it would be rational and it wouldn't be overbearing.
You're asking him how he evaluates credibility.
I guess that's true.
How does he reconcile different accounts?
Right, but we wouldn't, if given your ruling, we wouldn't go into applying it to this case. We would just give them the rational principles that would help them weigh the evidence. It wouldn't tell them how to do it. It would just give them a framework for doing it.
I don't know. That's kind of like being an expert in being human and understanding people.
That does this for a living, has done it again,
And how
not
does
just
that vary from what the jury does? If you look
Yeah.
at the credibility jury instruction that
Yeah,
I've already read,
I think
for
so.
example,
And to be
how does
clear,
that differ? I mean, where
this
it talks about conflicting
at first I thought this was a
testimony,
question
how does
of
what he's offering provide
him
any
being an expert or
specialized
not an expert.
knowledge? I consider that
They're just
generalized.
yeah.
determining
So
how
I don't
big
think
his
he would
scope
just
is.
talk about general principles of evaluating witnesses. He would talk about particular aspects of a ski slope
Like
or
what?
witnesses on a. If he were here right now, he could help me. Yeah, right. He is right here.
So when ski accidents happen, and people go to the ground, their skis get released. I could see that as specialized knowledge, just
Right.
like this witness offered something along those
Yeah,
lines.
no, that is an important thing. He can
But
explain
in terms of this skier said such and such, and this skier said such and such, but this is how I evaluate that aspect of it. I think that's invading the providence of the jury
that. Okay.
on deciding how to weigh testimony.
Okay. For the record, if I may, Your Honor, would just, I think we put this on before, but in case we didn't, we believe the motion to exclude Dr. Bogger or limit his testimony is untimely, and that Greg Skordas, their expert, whose report does much the same thing that Mr. Bogger's report does, should be limited in the same way. Again, just renew our request that he be able to speak to the jury about his evaluation of the ski accident.
So just again, my sort of ultimate conclusion on what I'm hearing on this motion to reconsider and on the response from the defense is that it's up to the jury to decide ultimately what the parties did, where the parties were positioned, and who ran into whom. So it's up for the jury to make those decisions. So as long as this witness steers clear of those areas, that's the main emphasis of my preliminary ruling, and I'll have to hear what's being offered.
Do you mind? I know I'm not an old man, but my memory has failed me. Those three again, who hit whom, going backwards.
It's up to the jury to decide ultimately what the parties did.
Right.
In other
Also,
words, leading
Southern-in-law,
up to,
check your
during,
DMs.
and
I
after
sent
the
you one
accident. It's up
on
for the
Twitter.
jury to decide that. Where and various experts have given them some helpful information, like the biomedical expert gave testimony as to what the biomedical evidence reflected that would help the jury make that decision. Just like this past witness gave the jury some biomechanical information that will help the jury make their decision about what happened in that accident, what the parties did, where the parties were positioned, and who ran into whom.
And the reason that you see Mr. Bogger as doing something different than, like, say, Dr. Schur just did, who took the jury through assuming these various facts. I'm not telling you that this account is true. I'm just taking as an assumption what Ms. Paltrow said was true. Let's analyze it. You're seeing Mr. Bogger as different, and I'm not totally sure how. Do you mind explaining that?
The plaintiff's witness applied biomedical principles in a methodical way to the different versions and then handed the jury that information. The biomechanical expert that just testified applied biomechanical principles to the different versions and gave that information to the jury to help them make a decision.
Okay. So,
and what I see this witness doing is reading different accounts and reconciling them and wanting to give his reconciliation to the jury, which I think is too close to what the jury actually does. It doesn't help the jury from an expert standpoint.
okay. So it sounds like you're not persuaded that of our position, which is that he has skiing expertise similar to like a biomechanical engineer has, and can apply that to the facts in a way that would provide the jury with some, again, rational scheme to assess the accident that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Under Rule 702.
Right. Okay.
And the same is likely going to hold true to Mr. Skordas' testimony.
Okay. And you say likely.
I've heard you make kind of a motion. I haven't heard from the other side whether they're opposing that in some way.
I see. You're just waiting till you have
But
more
I mean,
specifics.
if he's the same type of an expert, and I realize that he may not be a risk manager and he may not be a ski accident investigator for an employer, but it sounds like his testimony is along the same lines.
Right. Okay. So just in terms of guidance on this ruling, you mentioned the bindings, and I apologize if we're going long. I just want to make sure that we
Specialized knowledge,
right. So
that can help the jury in making their decision.
So would, in your mind, would something like recognizing that the positioning of the skiers, if one skier is uphill, applying a certain knowledge of skiing, that would suggest certain things about the accident. Would that be out of bounds?
I guess I have to hear the question, but it sounds like you're getting back into making conclusions based on an investigation. If you lay out some hypothetical facts to say if this skier was here and this skier was here, from a skiing standpoint, and then ask questions based on that, I could see that. But
okay,
it's feeling a little too hypothetical right now.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Honestly, I applaud
my questions.
Sure.
I
Ms.
applaud
Van
him
Orman?
for sticking through the argument and just
Circling back to why I raised this in the first place is the concern with the animation. And so what I don't want, because Mr. Bogger apparently had some involvement in creating the animation, which was not designated in his report, nor was any mention on what his involvement was, what he did for it, how he placed anybody anywhere. There's no discussion of any of that. I don't think that it's appropriate for him to comment on the animation and to say, well, yes, I saw that, this helps me because I'm the one who helped to place these people there. It would have been, again, by reading the depositions and applying, which is what the jury needs to do. So I would say he can't even talk about the animations because that just goes beyond the scope of his report, anything that he's done in the case.
I think the judge is going to disagree with her too, probably.
I would agree.
Oh, you would agree? Okay.
Unless the foundation can be set. I mean,
I haven't heard anything that would establish a foundation.
we have been
no problem.
broadsided, Your Honor. We had a 37-page report produced a long, long time ago. There was a motion deadline that we respected months ago. These issues were argued 45 days ago, and then immediately before our witness is going to take the stand with this 37-page report, we get essentially a midnight filing, and that guts half of his opinions. I don't think it's fair, Your Honor. I can't even read the darn thing. I'm focused on getting my witnesses ready. The untimeliness is very prejudicial to us, Your Honor, because we can't properly brief this in days.
I've already ruled that the initial motion was timely, and I made a ruling on the initial motion. The subsequent motion was not untimely. The court has agreed to reconsider the motion, and that's what I've done. And I don't feel that it's unfair or unduly prejudicial.
Yeah.
You were aware of the issues with his report long ago.
But you ruled in our favor before.
What I ruled was that the initial motion didn't give the court enough to grant it.
Because they
so then there was a motion
briefed it.
Then there was a motion to reconsider that gave the court more information, and I can see that it would be. I mean,
you can't poorly brief
a motion. I mean, this would create an appealable issue. Do you want to do that for your client? Is my question.
No, but I don't want to. They poorly brief something. The judge denies it. Then right before the testimony, they better brief it, and now we lose. I mean,
that's kind of what happens
is.
sometimes.
This is trial.
Yeah.
Things happen.
Yeah.
The points that were raised in the motion are valid points. They're sound. They're based soundly in the law, and I want to make sure that what the jury hears is sound and not subject to any more risk of appeal than possible. So we'll take 5 before the jury comes back.
Okay. So basically all of that was, if anybody just airdropped in, that was an argument between the two sides about the next upcoming witness. Gwyneth Paltrow's side is going to be putting on another expert. It sounds like it's another sort of skiing expert to try to reconstruct what happened. And so basically they kind of just gutted his testimony, I guess, or just sliced it in half. These complaints by Owens, I get it. It sucks when you think that you're winning on it, or that you've already won on an issue and you don't have to worry about it anymore, for that to just like balloon up again out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden you lose and you're like, crap, I was kind of relying on this. I can empathize with that, but at the same time, to say like, hey, Your Honor, you should find in our favor because they gave this to us in a fashion that made it hard for us to respond to this time. I don't know. I mean, both sides have been doing this from what it looks like, but what he was doing here is really just coming up with excuses. So, okay, looks like we've got a timer here for 5 minutes, a 5-minute break after that. So it sounds like this expert will testify, and this expert will testify as an expert as opposed to a lay witness. But there's going to be certain things that he won't be able to testify to. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I am not tired yet. I mean, I don't know. I'm not bored. I'm not at all bored. That last witness was nuts. Absolutely nuts. Not the witness, but the cross-examination. What a star witness, honestly. He was so good. He was so good, very clear with his explanations, talking about how the other guy made a mistake and that therefore all of his conclusions are out. And the thing about expert witnesses is it's almost off-putting if a witness gives too hard of a conclusion. So, for example, where Dr. Bain, previously, that was the plaintiff's witness that Dr. Scher was responding to, and he was kind of critiquing. For him to say that it's impossible for it to have happened like Gwyneth Paltrow's account, that's a hard line to take, right? Most experts are going to be, generally speaking, as confident in their conclusions as they reasonably can be, but they're often going to be somewhat cautious because of the fact that, I mean, it's your professional reputation on the line. Like no one wants to be caught with their pants down, right? With making a huge whoopsie, especially in a case like this, they had to know that this case was going to be getting publicity, as it has been getting publicity since the very beginning. So when you have a witness that is making that strong of a conclusion, saying it is impossible, that leaves for the other side the opportunity to come in and say, let's find at least one way to show that it's possible. Don't have to show that it's 100% what happened, but it is possible. What that does is it undercuts the credibility of that prior expert witness, because then you're kind of looking at it and you're like, okay, you may have overstated your cards here. You maybe are what am I saying? What am I thinking here? Like you maybe are getting a little bit loosey-goosey with your conclusions. And so it undermines the credibility of that prior witness, basically, which is not a good thing when you have a case that really relies on witnesses, on expert witnesses, to be specific, right? Because like we talked about earlier, if there were concrete, hard evidence, video evidence as to what had happened, it wouldn't even be going to trial, because you would have one side go, whoopsie, can we settle? Or whoopsie, Can I withdraw? I want to withdraw. This was a mistake. This was a mistake, Your Honor. Like that's what would have happened with concrete video evidence. And that's why we have to be relying on these expert witnesses, in part also because of the fact that nobody seems to have seen it other than Gwyneth Paltrow, who experienced it and didn't black out at all. And then Craig Ramone, who says that he saw it, but he has perception issues and potential bias issues. Potentially. Bias issues, I think, are a little bit less strong. Although, no, I take that back. Because
ready for the jury?
They've made a big deal about him being just a Facebook friend as opposed to a regular friend. But he may have also, on that mountain that day, he may have had an emotional reaction to how he sympathized for Terry. And in that moment been like, I'm going to look after you. I'm going to take your side on this.
I didn't hear anything, so they went to get the jury.
So there could have been an emotional connection there that happened on that day because he just felt bad for him. So anyway, sorry, I was watching to see what was happening on the screen. So where we have such little hard evidence to go on, we are relying so hard on these expert witnesses. And that's where this last witness was like chef's kiss for Gwyneth Paltrow, because not only did he explain things so beautifully that the jury, I'm sure was paying attention, actually, like the more I thought about it, because he was turning and making eye contact with the jury, and not in a way that's like, hi, are you meeting my eyes? Are you meeting my eyes? Like, do you see me? Connect with me, please. Connect with me. Like he was just kind of turning and being like, yeah, so this is how I calculated things.
James again.
Okay, Mr. Egan.
We call Paul Bogger our ski expert.
Thank you, Mr. Bogger.
How do you spell that? I want to know.
If you could walk right over here to the clerk and she will swear you in as a witness.
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give in the case now before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? Thank you.
Good morning. Would you start by sitting down and then giving the jury your full name and spelling it?
Please.
Once you get situated.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Paul Bogger, Paulbagher.
All right.
Your Honor, I note that my computer is still there. Do you mind if I grab it?
Sure.
Mr. Bogger, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Will you tell the jury what you understand to be your role here today?
Yes, I was retained to do an investigation to consider all the circumstances involved in the accident that you've been sitting through here. And I've also been asked if asked to assume certain facts, I could give opinions as to how that might work. Would that be plausible? Do I see this? I think maybe a lot of what I would hope to add today would be to sort of give the operational side, the skiing side, the things that we observe in accidents, and when we evaluate them, what we learn and what I pass on. I do a lot of teaching and training, which we can get into, but those are, I think, the sort of the key areas.
So do you have expertise to help educate the jury about the skier responsibility code?
Yes.
Or just reasonable principles about how to ski?
Yes.
What about how, like, for example, bindings and ski equipment might factor into how they might work in a certain collision?
Yes.
And why do you have confidence that you can explain that? And with authority to the jury?
Well, I've been involved in working professionally in the ski industry for 37 years, and I've primarily focused on the outdoor, on snow, skiing, more specifically ski safety. That involves ski accidents. I do a lot of ski accident investigation. I mean, literally thousands and thousands. And I've done a lot of collisions. I've worked on a lot of collisions, and I haven't just done it at one ski area, my home ski area, but I actually had 4 ski areas that I did risk management oversight for. And I'm primarily a patrol director at my base, but then I moved into more supervisory roles that started to involve other ski areas as well, including one in Canada, one here in Utah that you're probably familiar with, Brighton. And those experiences of looking at these accidents in a variety of locations has given me quite a bit of information I can use to do the day-to-day use of that. Do we need to address certain issues on the hill? Do we need to remove a skier, for example, if somebody's unsafe? In bad collisions and bad accidents, we really do need to learn as much as we can. We get medical feedback. We just consider a lot of information. And then the last piece of that is I pass a lot of that on. I've been training and teaching people in the ski industry about accident, skier collisions, skier safety for the last 20 years. And so I've been all over on that.
Do you have any higher education?
Yes, I have a degree in economics.
And what about certifications that are related to ski sports or skiing?
Yes, I would have a number of certifications. I'm not sure how many of them would bear directly on the ski accident part, but I'm an EMT, an instructor of outdoor emergency care, a licensed blaster, an aerial blaster, which means we can use explosives from helicopters and mostly for avalanche control. Well, I guess only for avalanche control. If there's anything else, probably be a big problem for me. I'm sure my license doesn't say that. But and then I have a number of schools that I've attended, avalanche schools and various ski risk management type things. And then, as I said, really the last 20, 25 years of my career, I've been mostly teaching and training others, whether it's the National Avalanche School, which we actually just held here in Utah in the fall, or consulting for ski areas, working with the National Ski Areas Association on national safety campaigns. The National Ski Patrol System was on the National Safety Board. And so there's a lot of related things. But I think that's the gist. I've been involved in, I like to even say, I've been referred to as an expert in this for a long time, and I've done a lot of trials and testimony on ski cases. But I always think of myself too as a student. I'm continually learning about it. I always want to know the next thing. And you think they're all the same, and a lot are fairly similar, but there's always something new and something different. So,
by the way, Greg, welcome to Bike Club. Thanks for becoming a YouTube member.
Capacity you mentioned of reviewing cases for litigation or giving testimony in court cases. Have you ever done that in Utah before?
Yes, I had a.
When was that?
Well, I've had a number of skier collisions that I've investigated here now with Brighton. That's more my oversight, and I'm reviewing the accident records. And then when we have a bigger collision that has more issues and so forth, or a ski accident for that matter, I'll get involved and I'll start going through a review much like we've been doing here. And I had a trial, I think 3 or 4 years ago in Salt Lake. Solitude, the ski area, was involved. And Park City, I've had a couple of collisions at Park City that I've done expert reports and so forth. But, those cases settled. But anyway, so yeah. And that's, again, I think what's different about what I do than, say, maybe what Mr. Graff would have been doing when he was the patrol manager, is that I do travel and I do go to all the different parts of the country, including the East Coast, for accidents and the investigations, and skier collisions happen basically everywhere. And that's been I'd say that I've probably had 20 cases that have gone to trial that I've been involved in. Maybe they haven't all gone to trial, but at least that have been in litigation.
And are you aware of any studies, or have you done any measurements of how common ski accidents might be?
Well, I'm certainly, I work with people who actually are involved in the what we call the 10-year interval studies, and there's been 4 10-year interval studies about ski accidents and the mechanisms of ski accidents. I look at that data. I also, excuse me, I think you heard Dr. Scheer earlier describing the ISSS, the Snow Sports and Trauma, so the International Congress for Ski Safety on that. And I've presented there. I've presented I can't probably keep track of all the different meetings and groups that I've presented to, but these are bigger groups, the ISSS, and then I also present papers and do peer-reviewed work. The International Snow Science Conference, ISSW workshop, hasn't
Thank you, Debbie.
was dreamed up in the 80s. They haven't lost that part of it, but it's a conference. It's an international conference, 1,000 people there. I do reports on things that happen, ski area problems, in fact, one ski problem with the snow immersion suffocation. I don't know if you've heard of that. You might have heard of tree well fatalities. Did you remember? We just had one here in Utah. And so that would be something I would gather data on. I talked to the general manager of the ski area that it happened adjacent to, and talked to the folks from the Avalanche Center here, Forecast Center. And they have some educational outreach that they do. And I basically was at the front of the snow immersion piece. I helped coin that term, and we did it. I keep a database. I keep doing ongoing research. I see you have another question coming.
No, it's fine. Well, I was
Just
just, if you
an
don't
idea.
mind me interrupting. So when it comes to measuring how common ski collisions might be in a given region or in a given place at a given time, do you have any particular data you can offer?
Yeah, well, certainly. If you looked at, I mentioned those interval studies, the rate in skiing accidents, the total skiing accidents of collisions is about 6 to 7% of all of the reported accidents. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of collisions where people just bump into each other and go on their way, probably a lot more of those. But ones that result.
Your Honor, I'm just going to object. I'm fine if this is just background foundation on Mr. Bogger's experience, but this goes beyond anything contained in his report.
I see it as background, so overruled.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as it's background.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, so that rate at 6 to 7% is sort of
Thanks for
uncanny
interrupting
from
the boringness.
interval to interval. So
Oh.
40 years of data now.
They've just
And it's
alerted the
still the
jury.
same. And now I use that metric myself because I'm looking at the 4 ski areas that I'm supervising. And then the other ski areas that I go to when I do investigations, I look at their data. Because the first thing I want to know is what is that rate here? And it can vary throughout the season based on weather conditions and snow surfaces and so forth. But, that's a metric is, are we doing okay? Do we have a problem? Is there something that needs to be addressed? And so I look at it. Well, in all accidents, there's all kinds of data you can get from accidents, not just skier collisions, in that way. And then we try to pass that information on. Sometimes we target it towards safety outreach. You can look at a lot of safety stuff on the National Ski Areas Association website that anybody can log on to and look at the safety pages, and a lot of stuff on collisions that's in there and skiing safely and so forth. I had a lot to offer in the production of all that.
Thank you. Do you have any knowledge of what the rate of ski collisions might be in Utah? How common they are?
Yes, and it would be almost identical. Yeah, there might be, again, minor variations from ski area to ski area. But if you looked at Deer Valley, for example, which I did, and I asked this question during my site inspection, and their rate is just right in there. It's probably 6%, 7%.
How many collisions, and I'm talking not ski accidents, but collisions where 2 skiers are hitting against each other, how many collisions like that have you investigated, evaluated in your career?
Okay.
Yeah, I looked through sort of back through the accident review data that I keep, and to just look at what you saw the other day, the incident report form, and maybe it's got something like an additional patroller comment or a ski instructor's incident report. I looked through that and I figured there have been about 4,000 of those that I reviewed out of about 44,000 accidents with just the incident report form that I've looked at. That's all accidents, but collisions, about 4,000. And then things that really got more investigated where there was things like we're doing here, 550 is, so that's
a lot.
It's a lot of accidents and a lot of collisions.
In those collisions
over a long period of time.
Sorry.
I just wanted to make, and nobody will think skiing is safe anymore. I wanted to finish that.
So
I think most people don't think that after this case.
Done those evaluations, what is your role? What are you trying to accomplish as you evaluate those accidents?
Well, sometimes we need to find the cause. Mostly we want to know the cause, and certainly that's how you can target prevention. But we also want to learn circumstances. Sometimes we have really bad injuries in these collisions, and it's important for us to make sure we know, is there somebody at fault? Are people meeting the responsibilities? And so we're looking at that all the time. And part of that is we want to make sure, since we're all responsible as skiers, that includes the ski areas, me, you, if you're skiers, that we share safety and we all do it together and we all have responsibilities. And if one of us is not doing our job,
that's pretty cool.
People get hurt.
Pretty cool.
And so we need to evaluate fault at times, and we maybe address some people that we actually remove from the mountain. We've had people go in cop cars off of the mountain, but we're serious about it. We want our skiers to know that we're serious about it, and they feel okay bringing their kids there, that we're not just turning a blind eye.
So in your evaluation of these various collisions, what have you learned about what the inherent risks of skiing are?
Well, certainly skiers face a variety of inherent risks, and those are often codified into, especially in states that have a lot of skiing in them, like Utah or Washington State or California. There's what they call like a ski safety statute in the regs, and so it will mention many times, it'll enumerate what some of those inherent risks are. Another place you can find those inherent risks are on trail signs. Are mandatory here in Utah, and that they're publicly displayed, but also the ticket back. Sometimes that varies from place to place. But do you want me to list any of the inherent risks? Or?
Sure. Yeah. Just to educate the jury, given your experience investigating these various collisions and just your experience as a long-time advanced skier, what are those inherent risks?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Yeah, it's pretty relevant. What are the inherent risks
Thank
of
you.
skiing?
Yes. So things that you encounter as a skier, things that you could likely have a problem with if you weren't paying attention and weren't following your role, your duties of things that we would identify under things like the Ski Responsibility Code, which we can talk about. But terrain changes, forest growth, bare spots, things that you might run into, objects, lift towers, grooming machines, snowmobiles. We try to keep those off the hill when people are around. But, that's part of the sport. People need to lift maintenance people need to get around the mountain. So snowmobiles would be in there.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what about inherent risks relating to ski collisions?
Yeah, and that's where I was coming to. So I wanted to give you the broad brush and then say, and things like inbounds avalanches, you can actually get, even if they do the mitigation, you can actually get into an avalanche inbounds. And that's a risk you hadn't seen identified for a while, but about 5 or 6 years ago, we started adding that one. And collisions, skier collisions, or even collisions with lift towers and objects. But skier collisions, as we know, 6 to 7% of the accidents, we can eliminate some things, but an inherent risk you cannot. And the definition there is the risk is inherent in the sport. You cannot remove it without fundamentally altering the sport as it exists today. So that means using good following our good responsibilities and being prudent skiers, we can reduce the risk, but we can't eliminate it.
So does that mean that sometimes collisions occur despite people reasonably skiing on both sides of an accident?
Yes, that happens all the time.
And when you investigate collisions, do you sometimes, after a thorough review, conclude that you can't determine who was at fault?
Yes, that's common.
So just to put that in another way, in your evaluations, will you come to the conclusion that a certain accident is, and the evidence that you received in gathering information about it is not clear enough for you to identify who is responsible for it?
Yes.
Link, thank you so much for the super chat, and thank you so much for the compliment. Happy to have you here as well.
Let's talk about the skier responsibility code. You mentioned that.
Yes.
And it's been brought up before, but since you're the ski expert, let's have you teach us about it for a second.
Usually if somebody says something like that, like you're the ski expert, they mean it sarcastically, but obviously here he means it literally.
Defense. Give me just a second. Sorry. Thought I had it right here. Yep. It's Defense 91. Any objection to that being published? Or I guess I should talk to the judge.
No objection.
91 is received.
Okay, so let's put this up on the screen. It's also on your screen right there, Mr. Bogger.
Yeah, thank you. I see it.
And I'll turn it here so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so is this the skier responsibility code you were referencing earlier?
It is, and it's actually changed in the last few years, but that's the one that was in existence at the time of this accident.
Okay, got it. 2016.
2016.
February.
2016 February, that's correct.
Okay, and how do you know about this skier responsibility code?
Well, it's key, excuse me, it's key to all of the duties that we were just talking about in order for people, the skiers, for us to do our part. And it's a national code, started back in the 60s with the National Ski Patrol system before they had professional ski patrols at ski areas. And it's used all over North America. Canada has something called the Alpine Responsibility Code. It's very similar. It has a few more details on it. I've testified in trials in Australia talking about a code that they have, again, very similar to this. But these are basic rules of the road. You have to give people, so you can put some order into the chaos that is skiing. You know, skiing is very dynamic, as you know if you're a skier. And so you're trying to put some basic rules in that people can follow. Their common sense. And go ahead.
Do you know, are there ways that skiers can become familiar with this responsibility code?
Yes, this is published at all ski areas. It's on trail maps typically, and you'd find them on big trail signboards too at the ski area. Websites will have it. There's all sorts of places you can go to find this, but it's everywhere.
Okay, and let's talk about the particular points here. I'll pull them out. Maybe should we just go through them one by one? Is that okay?
Sure, however you want to do it.
Okay, so the first one, always stay in control and be able to stop or avoid other people or objects. That seems fairly common sense.
Yes, that's if that one doesn't work, the rest of them aren't going to work.
And then the second one maybe is more important. People ahead of you have the right of way. It is your responsibility to avoid them. Can you explain what that means for skiers?
Yes, and the presumption is when people are skiing down a run, the people in front of you aren't going to have that rear view like you would. You'd be in a better position as an overtaking skier to see the people in front of you.
Got it. 3 is you must not stop where you obstruct a trail or are not visible from above. What does that mean?
Well, again, it's just about being visible. And so if there's a breakover in the terrain and you were on the bottom side of it, the skier that's coming from above isn't going to see you. And so it's to prevent surprises. And again, if you're skiing in control, if you're following the first rule, when you're coming up to terrain changes, that's one of the things that skiers have to manage is their skiing, their speed, their rate, their course, and most importantly, their lookout that's what allows them, even if they come to a terrain change and there's let's say a small child taking his skis off on the downside of that hill, you're not going to run into him, even though that person might not be following the code. You're not following it either if you just go tearing over the hill. You have to be able to be in a position to maneuver so you don't hit anything.
Okay, so if a skier were taking, are you familiar with the term GS turns?
Yes, giant slalom.
If a skier were taking GS turns, what principles here should that skier follow?
Well, with a GS turn, and again, just backing up for a moment, skiing is very dynamic. It's people that are changing positions relative to each other all the time. And people are going at different speeds. People are using different styles. And you're mentioning one of them, you know, short radius turn or a slalom versus a larger radius turn, more rounded turn, a giant slalom. And these are different styles. And there's no prescription for how you have to do it or even what your ability is, any of that. There's no speed limit. I mean, there's slow skiing areas, but there's no number. So the idea is skiers have to be able to be in control, and it's the lookout. In a GS turn, you're taking wider swaths of terrain. You're moving across more, you're using more of the available hill space. So again, if there was trail density that was suggesting maybe you should be skiing shorter radius turns, that would be a reason. But typically when people are skiing giant slalom turns, their speed is usually faster. And people that are skiing short radius turns, I mean, if they try, they can ski quickly, but most of the time the turn is what controls your speed. So if you're making more of them, you're probably going slower.
What about, let's assume a skier is overtaking another group, they're skiing through a group that's skiing slower. What responsibility does that skier have?
Well, again, as the overtaking skier, you're looking at the rule number 2, people ahead of you have the right of way. And when you're coming into a group, you need less space to maneuver. And your lookout has to be sharper because you have more things to focus on. Again, remember, everybody's not moving in unison. They're moving dynamically, and people can turn suddenly. And so again, if you're a prudent skier, and this isn't necessarily covered in the code, but if I'm going to make an abrupt turn on a crowded run, that's a problem for me. If I didn't look, I need to look up. You know, it doesn't say you have to look uphill, but so the code gets you just so far. And I think, if I may, one of the things about the code is if you try to look at any one rule and say, for example, in a collision, because I have to look at this all the time in these investigations, or when I'm training people, I would have to tell them, never focus on just one. That's just one part of the puzzle. There's usually something else. And if I had a penny for everything that was involved, the failure of the lookout. For example, if I might have two skiers in a collision, and both are trying to be not the uphill skier. And I look at them and I'm going, but you were changing your positions. You had different speeds. You were merging and converging on each other. You both have the responsibility for your lookout. It can't just be straight ahead. You have to be looking. And that's part of why you have to go to number 1, and that's the king. And then you go through the rest of them, but you can't hang your head on just one. Now, in some accidents, it may be really prominent, and you can weight it that way. But I'm just saying, you need to consider all of this, and the lookout you can't forget.
Right. So,
hello, welcome, Southern Law.
About what can you tell us about the rules of
turn your
skiing
volume up,
reasonably
probably.
that relates to skiing within your ability?
Yeah, court feed's a little loud today. So.
Well, it's not a rule per se, but it is right here that you have to be in control. So that means for whatever slope you're on, whatever the snow surface might be, it might be a hard, icy day, and you're going faster. It might be a little harder to control your speed. You know, you need to then, it's not that different, I guess, from driving there, because, you know, if the weather's bad and your braking distance is bad, then you have to give more room. And I think creating space is a key, but you have to ski within your ability, and you want to assume that maybe not everybody's doing the same thing and leave a margin.
Okay, so what about if take an example of a skier that may have certain physical disabilities. Does that skier have the responsibility to take account of those disability or those limitations and ski appropriately?
Yes, of course.
Let's move away from this for a second and ask you about a hypothetical that connects to Dr. Scher's testimony. You were here when Dr. Scher testified earlier, correct? And he talked about bindings releasing. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you have knowledge about how bindings release in ski collisions?
Yes, I do.
So if you were to assume a certain skier came and hit another skier directly in the back at a high rate of speed, would you expect bindings to come loose, the skis to come off the skier?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation also not contained in his report in the lease. There is nothing mentioning any binding release anywhere in the report.
Sustained.
Oops.
Yikes. Yeah. Ruh-roh.
Let's try take another hypothetical. Give me a second to think it through.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw earlier, but they basically had like half of his testimony cut in half.
Bindings.
Half of his testimony was cut out.
Someone skiing directly into someone else's back. Would you expect that person to launch over the person they hit in a couple feet down the mountain?
Same objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Yeah, this one might go a little bit more rough.
Is there a space on the hill where skiers where you let me think about it differently. If a skier were trying to avoid collisions and ski in a kind of safe and cautious place on the hill, where should that skier go?
Well, you could look for certainly train within your ability. And if you want to be cautious, you'd probably want to be on easier runs. And if you were wanting to be away from more people, specifically if you're concerned about skier collisions, and runs are getting crowded these days, you pick the right time, or you wait for opportunities. You can wait for traffic to go by and then you can go. Staying on the margins of the run is usually good because you only have one side to defend, if you will.
So if a skier were taking short radius turns on the right side of a run, would that be within the parameters you've just described?
Yes.
You can do it.
I did cut you off a little earlier when you were talking about the inherent risks of skier collisions, the things you learned about what the inherent risks are in skiing, investigating collisions. I want to make sure you got out what you wanted to on that point. Was there anything else?
Well, I mean, that's a big question.
Objection vague.
Sustained.
I mean, when the witness starts
Your
saying
Honor,
that's
may
a big
I,
question.
take a second to
Your own witness you're paying for. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I think this one, they had so many plans for this direct that they just had to throw out at the last minute because they got his testimony so limited. At the end of the day, though, I think it's still a great day for Gwyneth Paltrow. Steve, did you see the expert testimony from the last witness?
I saw a lot of it, and he seemed, I didn't catch his first part, but he seemed like he was feeling really good about how that went, the expert. And the lawyer was like, almost like this, like, oh my God, what's happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. And he was kind of smiling and laughing a bit, which I would have been concerned with, except for the fact that he seemed to be making eye contact with the jury the whole time. So I feel like it wouldn't have looked as natural, and he wouldn't have felt as comfortable with doing that if they weren't meeting his emotion.
Yeah.
You personally went to the site of this collision, correct?
I did.
And were you there when Mr. Brill, maybe I should ask first, do you know Mr. Brian Brill?
I do.
And who is he?
He does animations, the ones that you've been seeing here, and he does them all over. For ski accidents, I think he does other things too, but he's very, very precise in laying out the terrain and the features in the terrain. You know, the trees are all the right height and the shadows are correct and all of that.
And you were here and you'd seen the animations before, correct?
I have.
Objection, Your Honor. This goes beyond the scope of his report. There's no mention of animations in the report.
Overruled at this point.
And-
I need to see how it's tied in.
Sure. I was just going to ask that given that you've been to the site of the collision, does the animation to you accurately portray the location?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained as to relevance, it doesn't matter. It was a demonstrative of the other witness's testimony.
Okay.
Thanks, Judge. Putting that in my notes for next time.
In this case, what did you review?
I looked at all the deposition testimony, the documents, and various forms. We did the site inspection. I did work with Mr. Brill on the animations. I talked to Mr.
Objection, Your Honor.
Graf.
Strike. Relevance.
Sustained as to relevance. Why don't we take our lunch break at this time? It's
Well,
just a little afternoon.
Yeah, because if he can't give his,
So we'll
his
take a
opinion
recess
on
and
it,
return at
it doesn't
1:30.
matter what he reviewed.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Ugh.
Is he
That's
necessary to
rough.
get the animations in? I mean, why not just not call him after that ruling by the judge?
Sorry. Yeah, no, we've already seen the anime, or at least some animations at this point. And I mean, honestly, I feel like we've seen enough animations to like have a sufficient image of how things happen from Gwyneth Paltrow's perspective. And the other side hasn't had anything like that at all. So it's already very, very powerful stuff for Gwyneth Paltrow's side anyway. So, I mean, yeah.
Questions in light
maybe
of
a
the
loss
court's
to them,
earlier
or-
rulings?
Let's see.
Okay. We'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you.
Okay.
He's pretty soft spoken, but he's firm though. The judge, it seems like. But
Yes.
decent to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. He's very polite and very professional, but he's also going to say things like, Mr. Owens, that's what trial is for.
Yeah, I heard that. I was thinking while this guy was talking, hypothetically, if you could testify, what would you testify about? I mean, try something. I wonder if they didn't have another witness ready before lunch or something. I mean, maybe they should have gone out of order or just dropped this guy because they lost that whole ruling on what he could talk about. And he's an expert. And if he can't talk about expert stuff, then he's just up there talking about how cool his background is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think, well, and the defense has really kind of been scrambling anyway because of their ordering of the witnesses, because the plaintiff side went over on how long they were planning on putting their case in chief on. So, you know, it's been mentioned multiple times now that the plaintiff side was intended to close their case in chief on Friday. And then it didn't happen until yesterday. Yesterday's Monday. So that kind of, I think, threw a lot of things out of whack for them already. And so then on top of that, having this witness get cut down, they probably were just like, we don't have someone to put on before lunch that can be here already.
Mhm.
So, man.
Yeah, I felt bad for that guy though, losing that ruling just before the guy takes a stand. You should have all your stuff all mapped out and everything, and then it's all thrown into chaos at that point.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's like that Mike Tyson quote, like everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, and he
just got punched in the
by-
face.
Yeah. So how do you think this case is going over? I mean, I've only seen a few snippets. How do you think
Yeah.
it's going overall?
I definitely think Gwyneth Paltrow is winning this case. I mean, they still haven't finished Terry Sanderson's testimony, which is like the most bizarre thing, because like they're making their way through the defense case in chief, but they still technically haven't closed the plaintiffs because of like how long things have happened. The defense was like I've mentioned, the whole witness ordering issue and like the timing issue. Yeah. So they were like, we're going to start our cross-examination of the witness, but of the plaintiff, but we have other people that we're not going to be able to call them if we can't call them at a specific time. Like they're gone. We lose them entirely. So it's weird. It's weird that they're going to at some point come back to his cross-examination again. And like, it just, the momentum of that is just so strange. But I do think that like with that caveat that like we technically haven't heard all of Terry Sanderson's testimony because of the cross-examination. I mean, going into it, I already was thinking that Gwyneth Paltrow is winning this case, if for no other reason than the fact that if there's any muddy middle goes to the defendant. So, because as we all know, plaintiff has the burden of proof here. So if you don't feel by the end of the plaintiff's case in chief that like this is in the bag for the plaintiff, then it's not a good sign for their evidence. And like yesterday, I think I felt basically the same way. Today, after this other expert witness, because this case is so reliant on expert witnesses, because like there's like no hard evidence really. It's a lot of like he said, she said, and then a lot of experts coming in to say what's plausible. This last witness, I think just hit it out of the park.
I guess I don't know anything about ski stuff because my ski code of conduct is don't ski, but I'm a little surprised they don't have like a security camera or something that videoed this thing. And maybe they did.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that. I mean, I guess they don't have them out there on the slopes. Maybe that's just another like bit of maintenance that you would have to perform out there when there's already a lot of changing conditions and you know, like I would imagine that that's like a whole bit of complexity that they probably wouldn't want to deal with. So to me, it's not that surprising that they wouldn't have cameras out on the slopes, but yeah, it's wild. Did you hear about the missing GoPro footage?
Well, there was something from the daughter who said, I can't believe it's all on GoPro, but then didn't she say that she just was thinking it must have been? And that's kind of what I gathered. I didn't see all of it though.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically, that's what the plaintiff side has been saying about this alleged GoPro footage. The only way that we even know of any, like the only reason why we're talking about GoPro footage is because of her response to his email with a link to a meetup post that's, you know, talking about like, this is what happened. Like, this is like from my friend and eyewitness. And then her response was like, I can't believe GoPro, like that somebody caught it on GoPro, which my only kind of response to that is that I was thinking, you know, yesterday especially, was why, like, there also doesn't seem to have been a response from Terry Sanderson to his daughter to say like, well, this isn't GoPro. This is just photos. You know, did you see it? I don't know. I mean, it's emails. So maybe, you know, a lot of emails go unanswered, but that's a point to think about. So yeah, so it's depending on who you believe, either she was mistaken and assumed that he had GoPro footage, or he made it go missing. I don't know.
I mean, she's you know, she's tall, I think, but she's really thin. So, you know, just listening to it, it's like, well, how does she get up and go away with just a massage? And this guy's whole life is altered. But of course, anything can happen in a crash, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, there is about 20 years between them, 25 years now, I guess, something like that. So, I mean, that can make a difference in bone density and that kind of stuff too. But also, I mean, but the way that this, I mean, that was the crux of like the expert witness that testified before this last one, was he went into the physics. Like, he's a biomechanical engineer, and he specializes in in snow sports. So it's like, this is like literally what he does is like issues like this, which to me was just like wild. So I was already just fascinated with like what he does on a regular basis. And so, I mean, he basically explained the physics of like how there would be a rotation and how he would land on his side and, you know, like, and how you would have such and such amount of force on his side. And so that can cause rib fractures or what have you. And, you know, maybe she was able to just catch her fall better with her arms and her legs. I don't know. But she also ended up on top because of the rotation. So that's another piece of that. So yeah. Well, I think I'm probably going to break for lunch actually. So I don't know if do you want to pop in again in the afternoon? I'm going to have a second stream later.
Yeah, I probably will watch some of it. So if you can use a
I won't hold you to it if you get busy. No worries. But yeah, that would be great to have you back. And if anyone does not know Steve from Southern Law, this is Steve from Southern Law. He has a channel on YouTube as well. Talks amazingly about all kinds of legal topics. He's linked in the description below to this video. So if you haven't seen his channel, go check him out. He's talked a lot about the Marilyn Manson cases. And what have you been talking about recently?
More just the criminal cases, you know, when I see something that's like, hey, here's a little bit of a legal angle to explain or something like that. The Murdaugh case going on, and the Crumley case with the parents going to trial for their buying their kid a gun while he's clearly mentally ill. And I think that decision is correct, but you know, I went over that a little bit. So just mostly watching some criminal cases right now, and when I'm not doing other things.
Yeah, that Crumley case is fascinating because it's not common to have parents of a perpetrator of a crime to be held criminally responsible for it. Like that's a big move.
The facts are so bad though, and the appeals decisions said more than once unique facts. This isn't precedent for other things. In case you're not listening to what we're saying. But I didn't think when I listened to the oral argument that they were going to let these guys go because the facts are really bad, as they are on the record. I mean, we haven't heard the defense version, but you know,
yeah,
sounds
wow,
bad.
That's wild. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to see the appeal decision, but I think it just came down like the other day, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty short, and it's not surprising. They lean heavily on the facts and say, look, this is a special case of reasonable foreseeability. It's not the normal thing. It doesn't replace the normal law, but it is awful. It's something that should definitely not have happened based on what they put out there. Just awful, especially with what happened yesterday. I was reading about it, this other case yesterday. And of course we have Nashville. So that's terrible too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I heard about that too. It's just, it's awful every time something like that happens. It's horrible.
But I'm not trying to bring you guys down though.
No, that's okay.
Other cases are just terrible.
Ending on ending. I don't know if I'm ending on this, but on a little bit of a lighter note, there was a question in the chat about how is Rick Hogue doing? How's his progress? We do of course miss him, but he's doing pretty well. Like his progress has been amazing. I haven't talked about this too much on live streams, but I did spend about a week with the Hogues in February, like mid-February. And I had a great time with them. And, you know, and even then, even in the course of time that I had been there in that week, he progressed quite a bit, and got, you know, he was getting stronger, getting better at doing different things. And now, I mean, I saw a post recently from Mrs. Hogue Law. You know, she's been updating folks on stuff that he's running now. Even I don't know, I can't remember what distance is, but he's able to run, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So that's very, very, very thrilling. And he's started to make YouTube videos and stuff too. I sent him a link if he wants to join. I don't know if he will, but we'll see. You know, yeah. So anyhow, so I guess we will end on that note for this one. So we will see everybody at 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So I think that's like an hour and 15 minutes. And yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me for this little bit. And yeah, it was great. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do some this afternoon. That's the last part with the Quaker Oats guy was kind of boring. So maybe something good will happen.
Fair. All righty. Okay, well, we'll end with that. Okay, I'll see you guys in like an hour and 15.
Have a good lunch.
All right. Thanks, you too.